Good evening and welcome to the April 12th, 2021 Town Council meeting. I'm calling this meeting to order. If we could start with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And I think for town council attendance, we have all councilors present except for Peter May, who I heard from earlier this evening. Moving to public engagement. Sherry, do we have anyone waiting in the wings for engagement?
Yes, we do. Our first one is Paul Janako.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Name Paul Janako, 17 Wiley Street, Wakefield, Massachusetts. Ladies and gentlemen of the esteemed council, I am here to announce you that tonight will be my last meeting in attendance as a councilor. I'd like to use this opportunity at the beginning of the meeting because it's not a response back and forth setup. So it's a great opportunity for me to express my many thanks to a numerous amount of people that I want to limit myself to the 3 minutes that I'm entitled to. So with all respect, I would like to commence by thanking the council for the many years of service that we've shared together. I'm going to say for the last 6 years for most of you. It's been a great opportunity to get to know you all and to work with you. We've been a great team together. We've passed some great issues over the years, and we've done some great items for the community, which I'm proud to be a part of you too. I would like to also thank the people of the town of Wakefield, mostly for the voting public who put me in office for 4 consecutive elections. To them, I hope that I did well in representing the community to the best of my ability and to do them proud in the fact that they did vote for me. I'd like to also thank the many volunteers who have worked with me to put on multiple events throughout the past years. I hope for your continued support in the future as well. To all the businesses in the town of Wakefield, I can't thank them enough for helping us provide community spirit and working with us to increase the businesses throughout the community as well. On a more town effort, I have to extend my thanks to the DPW, the Wakefield Fire Department, the Wakefield Police Department, the Wakefield Municipal Light and Gas Department for all of the years of working with the many activities that we've put on for the town. You are the best of the best. There is no other teams that I can compare you to. You are all for the community, and I appreciate all your support throughout the years. Mr. Mayo, thank you for putting up with my BS for 12 years. You've been a constant guidance.
That's for Joel and Toss.
Yeah. Listen, you've been a constant guidance in controlling my efforts, and I appreciate that. And I thank you, Steve, for all the years of ups and downs. We've accomplished a lot in the years. To Mr. Mullen, you made a comment early on. I'm not going to repeat it, but when I first became a selectman, you asked me a question, and I always remember it. You made me laugh back then. You've made me laugh many times during the years at these meetings, but you have been always a gentleman in responding to all my phone calls and providing me with the proper legal responses to my concerns. I thank you, sir, for your participation and helping me through the 12 years.
Well, thank you, Paul. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, sir. To a person who could bring light to a black hole, our clerk, Sherry Dalton. She always has a smile on her face. She goes above and beyond to put up with the antics of this board, and to address the needs that we demand at every meeting. Sherry, I'll miss you the most. I really will. You've been a pleasure to work with. It's been a long journey. It really has. 21 years in all. I'll probably miss a ton of people in who I want to thank, and it just that there's too many out there. I do want to thank all of you for your support over all these years. It's been an honor. It's been a privilege. There's so much that we can do for this town. On a parting note, the town as a whole needs to find a way to unite. There's too much angst out there right now. There is too much division in my eyes. Something has to be done to unite them, and I don't know what that answer is. I'm leaving that up to the council and the future council to determine the best course of action to solve that problem. With that being said, as Bob Hope once said, or said many times, thanks for the memories. There were a lot of great ones, and there'll continue to be a lot more in my future. But for now, thank you all. Thank you to the citizens of Wakefield. You're the best. Let's do what's right for the town, work together, put your indifferences aside, try to work for the common good. Thank you again. I think my 3 minutes are up. Thank you very much. Done.
You muted, Ann.
Oh, I said wonderful things about me, Paul. You didn't hear them. You too. Thank you, Paul. You've been a wonderful colleague for me these past several years, 9 years, I think, almost. So thank you very much for that. And hopefully we may see you April 26th.
Oh, there's no promises at this point, but let's see what happens.
Okay, we would love to see you on the last day, and you can repeat whatever you'd like to say.
No. I wanted to use the 3 minutes now because I didn't want to, go back and forth like we are right now. But I greatly appreciate it.
I'm chair, so people get to go back and forth with you when they want to, either now or at the end of the meeting. So we can do that at the end or at the next meeting we have, where hopefully you'll be. Any other public engagement, Sherry?
Yes, we have Daniel Lieber, 1 Elm Street, and I do see that he's on with us.
Okay.
Thanks,
Dan.
Sherry. Thank you, Chair Santos. Dear town councilors and fellow neighbors, as you and many of our neighbors may be aware, our town was visited by members of a local neo-Nazi hate group, the National Social Club, yesterday. While they have a First Amendment right to spew their hate, we have no obligation to give them a platform. This did not appear to be a pre-planned visit and was likely because they encountered appropriate resistance in Malden earlier in the day. Ignoring hate is not an option. Hate breeds fear. Unchecked harmful behavior can lead to genocide. The symbols used by this group include their logo, a modified form of the SS Special Forces logo who exterminated Jews and those deemed undesirable in Nazi Germany. They use the number 110 to indicate this should become the 110th and next place to expel or exterminate Jews. Symbols have meaning. Symbols, like words, can cause significant harm. Let that sink in for a minute. In the debates that have been occurring regularly in Wakefield over the past months about symbols, logos, and imagery, we want to use to represent groups within our town. This is not just a theoretical fear. Very real fear exists within Wakefield. Just today, I've personally heard from multiple neighbors, including town officials, who are legitimately afraid to speak up publicly about differences due to repercussions from legitimate concern of physical harm to their families, to personal ridicule by neo-Nazis and also by those seeking public office. We are not a particularly diverse community, and the presence of neo-Nazis without resistance or response is indeed scary. However, we can actively reject the ideas from this group and those with similarly vile messages and actively support our neighbors, including those who have actual diversity of race, ethnicity, national origin, sexual orientation, religion, disability, and other protected classes. Our actions individually and collectively matter. We can make our community better, or we can make our community worse. I ask each of you personally and in your official capacity to actively take meaningful action to support our neighbors, including those who are Black, Indigenous, people of color, and others who are marginalized and tokenized. The discomfort you may be feeling is similar to those who are not here or unable to advocate for themselves. My family is included in this too. Civil rights, including the right to feel safe in our community, are never supposed to be up for a vote. I urge each of you to support our Human Rights Commission in openly and directly supporting our neighbors and also condemning the views of those who embrace hate and sow distrust. Hate has no home here. Let it be known, loud and clear. I look forward to seeing your response tonight to work toward becoming the better, more inclusive, welcoming community we each want Wakefield to be. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dan. Sherry, any further?
Yes, we have Maria Muty, 34 Hopkins Street, and I do see her on.
Great.
Yeah.
Hey, Maria.
Hi. Thank you for having me here tonight. I just have a brief few things to say. The Wakefield Human Rights Commission condemns in the strongest possible terms the presence of a recognized neo-Nazi group in our town yesterday. We invite all interested community members to attend our monthly meeting next Tuesday, April 20th at 7:00 p.m. and to bring ideas for anti-racist action. We had a similar meeting last June after the murder of George Floyd and have been working throughout the year on some of the ideas generated there, but there is still much work to be done. Participants who attend the meeting may speak for up to 3 minutes during the public participation segment of the meeting. If you cannot attend the meeting but want to share your ideas, please email them to whrc@wakefield.ma.us. To anyone feeling shaken by yesterday's event, we stand with you. You belong, you belong, you belong. Finally, while we will continue to do the work of advocating for the human rights of all, we hope that you, the town council, will join us tonight in condemning the message of this group who preaches intolerance and hate. Swift action is needed, so please join us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maria. Sherry, any further?
Yes, Matthew Friedman, 72 Bennett Street. I'm not sure if he is on. Doesn't look it.
I don't see Mr. Friedman.
Okay, so we'll go to Teresa Davenport, 72 Bennett Street. Not quite sure if she's on.
I don't see her on either.
Okay, we'll go to the next one, which is, I know he's here, David Hatfield, 23 Butternut Road.
Thank you, Sherry.
You're
Hey,
welcome.
David.
Madam Chair, town councilors, appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. I just wanted to follow up on the letter we sent you from the members of the zoning board and just reiterate personally a few of the key points in there about the reappointment of incumbent members Chip Tarbell, Tom Lucy, Greg McIntosh, and Mike Feely. You know, I just wanted to reiterate their importance to the board, the unique skills and experience they bring over these last few years. Certainly Chip goes back a lot longer than that, but you know, as you know, there've been a lot of projects in town, and they've all contributed valuably to that. There's several ongoing, and there's more to come. We know that. So I think it's important to maintain that membership of the board, the perspective that those members bring from these projects that have gone on before us and the ones that are still to come, maintaining that sort of membership and continuity. I think it's important to keep that going for the foreseeable future, at least, and for tonight's hearing to reappoint these 4 members. So that's it. I just wanted to, again, reach out to you personally and appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Sherry?
Yes, the last one that I'm aware of is Pina Naciarelli, 14 Bellsmere Avenue, and I do see her on.
Okay.
Just wanted to, again, reach out to you personally and appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Pina.
Hi, everyone.
Sherry?
Yes, the last one that I'm aware of is Pina Naciarelli, 14 Bellsmere Avenue, and I do see her on.
Okay.
Good evening.
Again, reach out to you personally and appreciate your consideration.
I think the sound. Hi, everyone.
Sorry.
Good
The
evening.
last one that I'm aware of is Pina Naciarelli.
Oh,
I think the sound is coming different.
This is new.
Is that the problem? Good evening. My name is Tina Clementina Mashadali Patel. I reside at 14 Ave.
Hold on, Pina. We can't.
Hold on, Pina. Hold on.
Peter May.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
please try to unmute yourself. We went ahead and muted everybody for a moment to try to get rid of that echo. So
Okay.
if we can try to maybe one at a time, you can unmute and then Pina can unmute and we'll see if it fixes the issue.
Okay, certainly. So Pina, can you please unmute and then you can start?
Try to unmute yourself. We went ahead and muted everybody for a moment to try to get rid of that echo.
Okay.
So if we can try to maybe one at a time, you can unmute and then Pina can unmute and we'll see if it fixes the issue.
Okay, certainly. So Pina, can you please unmute and then you can start?
Try to unmute yourself.
Okay.
We went ahead and muted everybody for a moment to try to get rid of that.
Ryan, you're on a loop right now. You're on a loop. You have to get rid of the loop.
No, I think the problem is that Pina has the meeting playing in a separate window that needs to be closed.
Ryan, you're on a loop
Does that work?
right now. You're on a loop. You have to get rid of the loop.
No, I
Tina, how
think
many
the problem
sources do you have
is that
open?
Pina has the in a separate window that needs to be closed.
Ryan, you're on a loop
Does that work?
right now. You're on a loop. You have to get rid of the loop. Tina, how many sources do you have?
Okay, so we'll try this again. Our apologies. If anyone has Facebook open or is watching this online at the same time, could you please close that window down? Because that may be causing the loop that we're hearing.
Okay. How's that, Ryan?
I think we'll find out once a few more people start talking.
Hello.
Bingo.
All right, Pina, I think you're good to go.
Good evening. My name is Pina Clementina Mashadali Patel. I reside at 14 Fellsmere Ave here in Wakefield. In 2018, the Town Council Chair, Peter May, School Committee Chair, Thomas Markham, and myself, as the Wakefield Human Rights Committee Chair, represented our committees and commission and signed a proclamation of acceptance and openness for all citizens. This proclamation was a rare signed statement unanimously approved by all commission members. In May of 2019, Wakefield was the setting of the regional conference tackling the state of hate in Massachusetts. It was a co-sponsored event by the Anti-Defamation League, the Wakefield Police Department, and the Wakefield Human Rights Commission. This is a time our community needs to pause its words. The space on Main Street and Church Street should be a space used to have discussions amongst ourselves. It's a space that we should be using our energy to respectfully share ideas rather than provoke and instigate hate. I am only a 24-year resident of Wakefield, but I am a proud daughter of immigrants. I am the wife of an immigrant, and I am the mother of an immigrant. I sing and dance the rooftops, the beauty of my family. We need to celebrate who we are, celebrate the members of our community. We need to stop hatred and look at who we are. Please join me in ending the hatred and sharing the beauty of the people who we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Pina. Sherry, any further folks?
No, nobody that I'm aware of.
So before I get to approval of the minutes, I had planned on saying something brief, and I was going back and forth because I certainly don't want to give any more added attention to the groups like those that showed up around the lake yesterday. But I appreciate what Dan Lieber says, is that you cannot ignore hate. I used to find groups like that to be, my opinion was that they were losers. They were impotent excuses for humans. And then January 6th happened, and I started thinking that they had a little bit more power, unfortunately. Make no mistake, White Lives Matter is a term of hate. It sends a racist message. And for folks that don't understand that, they need to do a little bit of research. We cannot equivocate that White Lives Matter is some form of non-hateful speech. We all know what it means. So I think there is no, this is not, there were some good people on either side. There were no good people on that side. And we saw them in our town. It was a bit of a pathetic showing. I think a lot of us didn't even know they were there because it was so small and quiet, but it still was impactful when my daughter, who's not in Wakefield, asked me about a white supremacist protest that was occurring. Our town is a town that's thrived on its immigrant base, my family included in that. And we are better than this type of behavior. I want to believe in my soul that we are a welcoming community, but I know that there are some that don't understand, whether through ignorance or intellectual laziness, that why White Lives Matter sends a message that not everyone is welcome, that it's a targeting phrase. And I think where we need to underscore and emphasize that the majority of our town, certainly our town leaders and not the vocal minority, welcome all people to town. So I appreciate those folks that spoke out about that yesterday. It was really discouraging to see the White Lives Matter banner held by just a small handful of folks, which was good. It wasn't a larger meeting, and apparently all across the country, that's what that group looked like. A small handful of people with the White Lives Matter. So I just want to make it clear, certainly as chair, I'm taking my prerogative again for saying that that is a term that there is no debate about what that means. Absolutely none. So thank you for indulging me. Can I please have a motion and a second for approval of the minutes?
So moved.
Second,
Moved by Julie,
second,
seconded by
Paul,
Paul, thank you. Roll call vote. Myself, yes. Julie?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Ed?
Aye.
Julie? I mean, strike that. Paul?
yes.
Jonathan?
Yes.
Thank you. Steve, do we have Bill in yet?
No, Bill is not in yet. He's actually volunteering on a committee much like this in his town of Middleton. So he's going to jump right off of that and jump in. But Joe Bertrand is here.
Great.
And we can continue with the agenda if you'd like, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So for any folks that are watching based for the Broadway crossing, we're going to address that as soon as Bill Renault comes to from the meeting that he's presently in. Mr. Bertrand, I asked you to just present on some updating for the high school project. And this is part of, let's educate Wakefield about the actual facts about the project. Unfortunately, there's been things said on social media and in the paper that are blatantly false about what we've done with the high school, where we are in the process. So I would love it if you gave us an update.
Certainly, thank you. Just regarding the high school project, the Permanent Building Committee, for those who didn't know, have actually met 6 times within the past 6 weeks. Some of the meetings lasted even more than 2 hours. Back in February, we put on a request for services for the owner's project manager, which is the first step in a very detailed procedure and setup by the MSBA. We can only go by the timing and by the schedule that the MSBA puts out. We can't go any faster. We can't go any slower. Well, we could, but we try to keep up with that schedule. And that's precisely the schedule that was given to us. We sent out what's called a request for service, an RFS, to the OPM. About 20 different companies responded to the request. There was a visit at the high school that was on March 10th. We then received the next week after that 10 proposals from owners, project managers, companies. For those, just for educational purposes, the owners project manager it's the town of Wakefield's person to connect with designers, with the architects, with the entire project. They essentially are our voice on a day-to-day basis. The owners project managers, I said, we got 10 proposals, and I would like to put, just as a side note, compliment the other members of our committee, because this is an awful lot going on. Not only did we have 10 proposals from OPMs, but at the same time, at the exact same time, we had 6 proposals for construction managers and public safety meeting. So the entire permanent building committee got headaches from reading so many proposals. But we did get the 10 proposals. We reviewed them, and we, according to the MSBA, we have to score them. And they have a set defined 11 categories to score. We scored them, and the top 5 we interviewed. And there 2 nights of interviews. They had 45 minutes apiece to make their pitch, 3 one night and 2 the next night. We are then, in accordance with the MSBA, we have to score them, and we score them on a 1 to 100 basis. We eventually able to determine at the end of it, out of the 10 members of our committee, 5 members voted for the company that came in first, which was Left Field. And just for the town's information, Left Field and the people involved in Left Field, the main person involved was the OPM, the owner's project manager for the Galvin. They were also, Left Field was also the OPM for the Walton School project, and are presently the OPM for the public safety building. So we eventually, the committee, as I look at it, we know them, they know us, and we were happy to select them. Now, the next part is, for a week, Mr. Mayo and I had to put together a report on all of that to the MSBA. That has gone to them. They then come back with questions, hopefully none, but don't bet on it. And then we then have, they then meet on May 3rd to review our selection and our documents and confirm the OPM appointment. After that, we then start the process of getting an architect or a designer for the project. That is the next step. We then sent out another RFS, another request for services for the designer, and that goes out in May. We finalize and submit that for review by the end, toward the end of May. We will receive the submissions around the middle of June. By the time that is set to come back, then is reviewed by the Permanent Building Committee. And then, contrary to what occurred at the Galvin, they have an MSBA has an entirely different process. We do not vote on a particular designer. We choose one that we prefer. However, the MSBA has a new procedure where you have to go to the designer panel. And the panel is consisted of 15 individuals. Only 3 of them are from Wakefield. The school committee has to pick a representative. Mr. Mayo or his designee has to go. and Doug Lyons, the superintendent of the school, or his designee goes. So we have 3 of the 15 votes to pick a designer. The designer panel from the MSBA picks our architect, not us. If we prefer a particular company, we can push as much as we can, but it is not a dead solid, this is going to occur. That will occur in probably by the time that occurs at the beginning of August. By the end of August, we will have had a designer, we would enter into a contract with them, and then the work begins. Now, as I said, we have no control over that schedule. That's what they want us to do. After the end of August, then the designer will begin to work what's called a feasibility study. Now, we had a feasibility study about 3-4 years ago from Doran Whittier. This is a more complicated, detailed feasibility study. You do a space study, you document existing conditions, you establish the design parameters, you develop and evaluate the alternatives, whether it's renovate and some new building, an entire new building, all kinds of different, you have to go through the entire options. That whole process, and also the schematic design after that, takes between 18 and 24 months. So people should understand, this is not happening in a year. This is going to take a long time. And I firmly suggest that the school building advisory committee, or whatever they were called, should start to meet once we have that designer, if not even earlier, with the OPMs to get an idea of what is going to be needed to be done. After then, there's the schematic design occurs, then they document and get ready for bidding. So you're talking at least, as I said, 18 to 24 months before you would probably get to a vote over the preferred design. That's what the schedule has been. That's what the schedule looks to be at best, according to the MSBA. So, as I say, we don't control what they do.
Right.
So if anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you so much, Joe. One question is obviously, just for the folks out there, that once we get to the feasibility study and get to that process, there'll be public hearings, we'll engage in the public, there'll be meetings.
There's going to be community meetings.
Right.
You have to have an enormous amount. If you may recall, 3 or 4 years ago when we started this process, there were a number of community meetings in the cafeteria at the high school that lasted all night long, and they were, but sorry, it's my comment. But there's going to be a number of community meetings, a number of public meetings. We'll have shows on WCAT. There's going to be a website. All of this was actually when we did the OPM selection, that was all part of their job to coordinate all that communication with the community, where we're going to have a website. You're going to have what all this other social media stuff that I'm not very good at, Facebook and all that stuff. All of that will be there for everyone to see and to understand. It's not like that nothing has been done. A lot has been done.
Right.
It's just, you're not going to have that community involvement until you get the architect, because there's no point of us talking about a design until we have the architect appointed.
Thank you, Joe. Do any members of the council have any questions for Joe? Sorry.
Julie?
Yep.
Or where my hand is.
Yeah, I see it, Julie, sorry.
Just for me, when is the next time it will come to town meeting? We've already approved the money for this design stage, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so it won't be until that 18 to 24 month period will be the next actual vote at town meeting. I understand we'll do lots of public meetings in between there. Is that the right timing?
Most likely, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And for the record, because we follow the MSBA, people also should understand the MSBA and the state contributes a percentage of the verifiable cost. And those are presently, the town of Wakefield is, we have already signed the feasibility agreement in which the state will reimburse us 49.4% of the cost of the study and the design and some of the architect. Once we get into the actual design itself, that can increase by 3, 4, even up to 5% points, depending upon the energy efficiency of the design, net zero carbon type of things, all that kind of stuff. I add points to it. People may recall 6, 7, 8 years ago, the Galvin was at about, as I recall, Steve, I think it was like 51%, but because we had some more energy efficiency, it was even up to like 54% by the time the
Right.
state reimbursed us for those costs.
Correct.
So there is money from the state coming to the town for all of this work. Not only this feasibility stuff, the EOPM and all of this work on a percentage basis.
Thank you, Joe. Any other questions from town councilors? All right, Ed.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Joe, for this update. I think one thing that stood out from the MSBA meeting when the first session when we were admitted in was the fact that if we are project ready, we can actually move at a faster clip than some other communities. Are you able to speak at all about that aspect of it?
Well, looking at the schedule and what the MSBA puts out as to for the documentation that they have, that where they used to have, prior to this new regime that they and procedures that they have, I would agree with you. I'm not so sure anymore. Looking at all the steps you have to take before that. If we are able to do the feasibility study quicker, because we have already had some of that work done previously, we may be able to increase that 18 to 24 months. That's why it's 18 to 24. I think we can. I'm hopeful that we were able to do it in the 18 and not the 24. But notwithstanding that, it is a process that you have to go, and then you have to meet with the MSBA, and they only meet once every month. So you can't just run in with, hey, we're all ready to go. You have to go through that process.
I guess for me, part of it too is I was surprised at certain projects that actually fall off because they don't comply with the 18 to 24 months, other communities, and so then that kind of elevates us up on the list if we are keeping the course, staying the course.
Right. I mean, they have very different, if you look at their schedule, they'll have 2 or 3 projects monthly that they'll be reviewing. And obviously if the money's not approved, or if there's something for one reason or another, you might be able to, but I would not expect us to be able to do anything quicker than that 18 months, because it is a long process we have to go through. We have to go through and document all the different options for the school. And that's not something that an architect can do in a month. It takes quite a while.
Certainly. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Jonathan.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Bertrand, for the update. I think it's a good reminder, on the one hand, of the complexity of the process, but I think the value of that is that complexity assures that it's a thorough process, and that we are looking at different options thoroughly and with a level of rigor that I think is appropriate for the size of this project. So appreciate that. I had one question which you touched upon in your response to Councillor Dombrowski, but I don't know if you are able to elaborate any more on whether there are certain components of the pre-feasibility study that was done a couple of years ago that effectively can be incorporated into the work that's being done now. And if so, any sense as to what impact that has, from a timing perspective, other than kind of putting us closer to that maybe 18-month mark as opposed to 24?
Well, I think if you look at what some of the elements that you have to go by, like the space study, when it was done 4 or 5 years ago, may not be the same. The existing conditions, many of that might be the same. You know, as we all know, like the science labs and some of that area is in pretty poor shape, and I don't think it's gotten any better. But, you know, some of those things maybe have to be looked at, you know, the HVAC, maybe things that the roof, everything has to be looked at again. So it's not something that I think that can be shortened greatly. I think the 18 months, I hope, would be the best view of a schedule, and then at the end of that 18 months, Tom would be ready to vote with the parameters and with the a potential budget that we would have.
Great, that's helpful. So again, if I could maybe sort of summarize or confirm how I'm understanding that, you know, the components that relate to existing conditions are probably the pieces that are most relevant. To your point, they probably haven't gotten any better.
Yeah, I don't.
But, you know, anything else probably is sort of new work that we would do as part of the new feasibility study.
Well, I'll give you an example. When we did the Galvin, when we had several different superintendents, and then every year there was a different view on a certain thing, and we had to change different labs here and there once we started the process. So, you know, there can be changes even in a 1-year gap as to what can and should be done.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the update tonight.
No problem.
And you're muted.
Yeah, I just figured that out. It looks like, Joe, we're all set for questions. I want to thank you so much for coming in, giving us an update on this project.
No problem. Thank you.
Have a great night.
You too.
So I'm going to move to item number 8, the declaration of easement. Steve, does that go to you or Tom? You're muted too.
Sorry, I was having a coughing fit before, so I muted myself. I can start with this, and then Tom can correct any of my legal mishaps, but hopefully it won't be there. So anyway, one of our articles at town meeting will be the relocation of a drainage easement on property located at 123 Salem Street. And, excuse me, 123 Pleasant Street. And this was an easement taken for drainage purposes back in 1962. It runs through the property, and there in the packet, I believe you all have a map or a plot plan of this. And it does show that a portion of the easement goes underneath the property, goes underneath the foundation. I don't know, you know, we don't know how or when that happened, but someone built a house there that went on the easement, didn't check it carefully. DPW has reviewed this. It is a drainage easement, and there is no encumbrance to our easement. There's no issue with it at all. And they are very supportive, and I think that letter is in your packet too, that we would move the easement kind of over to the, I guess that would be to the west a little bit, to the southwest side, and that's in the red hashed areas in your on your plot plan. This would allow the present owner of the property to sell his house or complete the sale of his house to the new buyer. In order to do that, in order to relocate an easement, two things need to happen. Number one, that I'd ask you to do tonight, is to declare the portion of the easement that runs under the property as surplus to the town, because we don't need it anymore and it doesn't do any good. And to approve the article for town meeting, and it would take a 2/3 vote at town meeting if needed. I will also note on your plan that the portion, there will be a portion of the remaining easement that we have that does go under the steps, and that is fine. So that's not a foundation issue. So I think I covered everything on that. Two-pronged process. Town council will declare this as surplus, the area that we don't need, and then there'll be a relocation at town meeting by a 2/3 vote. Tom, did I get that right?
Yeah, exactly. I have nothing to add. Thanks.
So Steve, before we have questions for any counselors, the vote we're taking today is to declare a portion of the easement at 123 Pleasant Street surplus?
Yes.
Okay.
Surplus to the needs of the town.
Can I please have a motion and a second to that effect?
So moved.
Moved by Ed,
Second.
seconded by Jonathan. Any discussion? Right, seeing none, roll call vote. Myself, yes. Julie,
Yes.
Maureen,
Yes.
Ed,
Aye.
Paul,
Yes.
Jonathan.
Yes.
Great.
Excellent.
Thank you, Steve and Tom.
Thank you.
Item number 9, Green Street in Stoneham. We've talked about this property several times before, but Steve, I'll throw that to you.
Sure. As the town council knows, the town council approved this property for sale, and it is a I think about 22,000 square feet of land in the town of Stoneham. This was once used, had some water towers on it. For Wakefield, those water towers have been gone for years, and sometimes communities own land in other towns, and this is a vacant lot, kind of a ledge burdened lot that's in Stoneham. So the town council did decide to go out to bid for this via an RFP process, which we had done before a few years ago and received 0 bids. I'm happy to report that this time around, with the support of the town of Stoneham, who wanted to go back on their tax rolls, because right now they're not getting anything, we received 4 bids, and this is just vacant land. They range from 169,000 to 261,000. I would suggest to the council that we again declare this property as surplus to the needs of the town. We do not use it for anything, and won't, and that we sponsor the sale of the property via the highest bid, and that is on the warrant. And I'm happy for any questions.
Any questions for Steve on this motion? Okay, so I need a motion and a second to declare the property known as 124 Green Street as surplus, as needs to the town. Green Street Stoneham, as surplus to the needs of the town.
So moved.
So moved by Paul,
Second.
seconded by Jonathan. Roll call, any discussion? Roll call vote. Myself, yes. Julie,
Yes.
Maureen,
Yes.
Ed,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
and Jonathan.
Yes.
Great, thank you. And the second vote we need, motion and a second to approve the bid, which is in our packets, and that, Steve, that goes to town meeting as well.
Yes, that would be a 2/3 vote at town meeting.
Great,
Just,
thank you.
on property.
Can I please have a motion and a second to approve the bid?
So moved.
Moved by Paul,
Second, and just a point of clarification, when we're approving the bid, we're talking about the $261,000 bid, Mr. Mayo?
correct, the highest bid. Thank you.
Second.
Seconded by Jonathan. Any further discussion? Roll call vote. Myself, yes. Julie,
Yes.
Maureen.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Ed,
Aye.
Paul,
Yes.
and Jonathan.
Yes.
Thank you. All right. Item number 10 is the annual town election and town meeting warrant, which we need to approve. So can I please have a motion and a second to approve the annual town election, April 27, 2021, and the town meeting warrant, May 8th, 2021. Steve, do we need 2 separate votes?
No, you can do it all as one. We can record them separately. And I would say that by combining these warrants, we do save money on publication. So
Great.
can't always do it, but when the dates kind of come like this, we can do it. So Sherry did a nice job getting that together, and putting that in will save us some money for publication. So
Excellent. Thank you, Sherry.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Moved by Paul. Second?
Second.
Seconded by Ed. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Myself, yes. Julie,
Yes.
Maureen,
Yes.
Ed,
Yes, with thanks to Sherry.
Paul,
Also with thanks to Sherry.
excellent, and Jonathan.
Aye.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Item number 11 is this Wakefield State Delegation. I see Donald on here. Oh, and I see Kate as well.
we don't see
I don't see,
Senator Lewis yet. We did feel that with everything going on, it'd be around 8 o'clock. So you don't want to keep going and bounce back.
Oh, sure, 10 minutes. Yep, that's fine. Thank you. If Representative Lieber Garabedian and Wong, if you could hang on just until 8 when we had noted this. Item number 12, the clerical union contract.
Okay, thank you. I guess this is me as well, Madam Chair. As the town council knows, back in January, we met in executive session to discuss the clerical union contract, and that has been is here for settlement tonight. And in taking a little bit of a different approach, and I think that our finance committee loved it. All of the raises under this contract were included in the budgets, and for my finance committee veterans here on the town council, I think that makes it a lot easier for you to follow year to year what you have, instead of, oh my God, I forgot to add in the contracts from the year before. So that really works well, I think. And hey, if we can get them done earlier, I think it's much cleaner and clearer to everybody. Anyway, this is a great group of people, about 25 members now. And they are the hardworking group. And as I've told you, my biggest problem with them has been keeping them out of the building during this whole pandemic. They're very passionate for what they do. They want to help the public, and they've worked very hard. Very benign contract, a 3% cost of living increase for fiscal year 2022, which is consistent with all of the other unions that have been settled. And then dropping down to 2.5 for 23 and 2.5 fiscal year 24. Being kind of wary that things may be changing down the road. And I think that 0.5% is big for us. For those of you that keep score at home, the cost of this is around $38,000 and some change. Again, a great group, and this will be in town meeting floor on all of the budgets, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Steve. Any members of the council have any questions? Jonathan.
Just very briefly, as one of those finance committee alums on the town council, I do appreciate having this built into the budgets that we've already approved. I think that does help from a transparency perspective and a planning perspective, quite frankly, as we're approving budgets. So I appreciate the work, Mr. Mayo, that went into that, and also the work that you and the union leadership did here to settle this agreement.
I think, Jonathan, you asked that question a number of times when you were on the phone.
I may have brought this up before, I know. Perhaps you heard from me a few times about it in my pre-town council days.
Any further questions? No. And Steve, forgive me, are we voting on this?
Yes.
Okay.
A motion and a second, yeah.
Excellent. Can I please have a motion and a second to approve the clerical union contract?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Paul, seconded by Jonathan. Roll call vote. Myself, yes. Julie?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Ed?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Jonathan?
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much. And if someone just can keep, oh, it's 7:53. We'll keep going. But if Brian and WCAT, if you can let me know if Senator Lewis jumps on, that would be great. We can start with some of the appointments. Item number 13, the Cultural Council name change. And I know, who do we have on here? Colleen Getty?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. Colleen, do you want to speak to the name change? You unmute yourself.
Hello, I'm sorry. I was multitasking poorly.
So you don't have to be on video, but you certainly can be on video. And if you could just identify yourself and then go, there you are, and go right into the reason for the name change, please.
Oh, well, our last meeting, we had a quick discussion about that. People just are confused about it. It's sort of just a very boring reason, but Colleen, between the Albion Cultural.
Oh, I just wanted you to identify where you're from, because the members of the public might not know what committee you're asking to change the name.
Oh, okay. My name is Colleen Getty, and I'm on the Wakefield Cultural Council.
Great.
We had a discussion about changing to the Wakefield Arts Council for pure boring logistical reasons. A lot of people get us confused with the Albion Cultural Exchange for good reason. And then also they get us, I think, confused with the Human Rights Commission just because of the word cultural. So we've had people even join our council, which we always love when we get new members, but then they, sometimes we don't even meet them because they realize they've joined the wrong council. They thought we were something we weren't. So then we have to say goodbye to them before we even say hello to them. So we want new members and we want people to have sort of more of a clearer understanding of what we do, which is predominantly to support the arts locally. And we felt as a committee and or council, and we voted at our last meeting and it was unanimous that everybody felt Arts Council was a little easier to understand and distinguish between some of the other councils and committees. So
Great.
That's our request.
Thank you, Colleen. And the memo you submitted made that very clear with a lot of research and history. So I appreciate that. Do any members of the council have questions for Colleen? Ed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say that I think anyone who has access to the packet can see that this appears to be rather perfunctory. I know that Mr. Mayo and Mr. Mullen have both already signed off on the ability to do this. So as I understand it, it's just a straightforward vote. So with that, I would move to change the name as requested.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Julie. Any further discussion? Okay, roll call vote to change the name of the Cultural Council to Wakefield Arts Council. Myself, yes. Julie?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Ed?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
And Jonathan?
Yes.
Excellent. Colleen, thank you so much for all the work you've done and for coming to us with this great request.
Thank you. And thanks for being so fast that I didn't even know you guys were up to this already. Sorry, I wasn't paying total attention. Thank you so much. And hopefully we'll get more committee members soon.
Great. Thanks so much.
Ann,
Yep.
Bill Renault is on. I don't think he's going to be long. You could
Okay.
Get rid of him.
The
Why don't
senator
we-
is also on.
Okay, so let's do Bill because it's a little before 8. Bill, thank you for jumping into this next meeting. If you could just tell our viewers who you are and that you're here to talk about the update to the Broadway crossing.
Sure. So good evening, everybody. Bill Renault, I'm the town engineer here in Wakefield, and I'm here to provide some updates with our friends at the Federal Rail Administration. So over the past, let's see, it's been about 4.5 months or so that we've been working with them to basically to continue our quiet zone that we have in town that eliminates the train horns from being blown. We submitted back in December a notice of establishment to an amended notice of establishment to maintain our quiet zone. That's the part that actually shut down Broadway. And then we also filed an amended public authority application to look at the different protections that we have around town and to recalculate those so that we could actually maintain the quiet zone going forward. At this point, we've heard from some of our contacts, and we're basically in the final stages of review right now with the folks that actually do the review of the safety measures that we put in place. And at that point, it would go to the associate administrator for safety for signature. At this point, we've had no comments at all on the application that was provided, which is actually a good sign. We've been in contact with them pretty much on a weekly basis over the last 4 months, obviously, because we understand how important the roadway is to the town's just general mobility. So unfortunately, we don't have a timeline as to when that will happen, but it really, I think that as soon as we get that signature finalized, we can mobilize and have the work done within 3 days to open it up. So really, we're just waiting on that signature. And, hopefully that would happen within the next week or so is what I'm hearing. But I also heard that we would have got a response back in early March. So that's where we're at, unfortunately. So I know that's not the answer everybody wants to hear, but that is where we are. So
no, thank you, Bill. And it's your understanding from just knowledge of this type of situation that no news on what we've submitted is good news. So hopefully we get the signature and then you guys can work quickly.
Exactly. That's the plan.
Great. Thank you, Bill. Do any counselors have any questions? Maureen, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Anne, and thank you, Bill, for that update. I just, this is a question for both you and Steve. I know last time you came and updated us, just wondering how we're going to update businesses and residents that live in that. And like, did we get anything up on the website about, hey, this is a timeline? Because, you know, not everyone watches these town council meetings. And so I'm just wondering how we're just sharing the information. So is there a plan for that?
So as calls have come in, you know, obviously they've come to my office, we've addressed them. So many residents have been calling. But, you know, we sent out initially back in January, a summary that laid out the process and kind of where we are. You know, at this point, we don't have really a time frame and a timeline. So it's kind of difficult to send out a message. My intent was, as soon as we received the notice from FRA, we would provide notice then. That was how I plan to handle it. But, you know, Steve, if you have a different opinion or a different way of
yeah, I've been in contact with a lot of people in the businesses there. Like you said, we could put up pending. We kind of don't know. Right. So that's the only thing.
Yeah.
But I get it. As soon as we know, they'll all know.
Yeah.
They have their own Facebook group and I'm in contact with them. So.
So I do. So I hear that. I know pending is tough. I would just maybe encourage, maybe we do some sort of Facebook post, something, Steve, that just says like, Bill updated tonight, you know, that 3 day is great. Like if you could write what you said and have Jen post it, I just think it goes a long way. The waiting is tough for people. So, you know, if people haven't heard since you initially reached out since January, that's just a long time. And who knows, maybe you'll write it and tomorrow they'll sign it. So maybe it'll
keep hoping.
Yeah, like maybe it'll be good luck. But I think the silence is a little too much. So just if I'm gonna ask that you post something.
We can do that. Yep.
Great. Thank you. Good suggestion. Jonathan.
Thank you. First of all, I completely agree with Councillor Butt. I do think the more that we can put out there is appropriate. And certainly if anyone in town knows the Associate Administrator of Safety for the FRA, maybe a phone call would be helpful. Quick question. I know that in the while the crossing has been closed, we've been allowing folks to take a left-hand turn onto North Ave. Is the plan to restrict that back to a no left turn lane once the crossing is reopened, or is that something that we'll be reviewing with the Traffic Advisory Council?
Well, we still have technically the restriction still exists. So my plan was just basically to put it back to the way it was previously. So I wasn't planning on bringing it back to the council.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Commission, I guess. Yeah, commission.
Ed, oh, sorry, Jonathan. Did you have another question?
No, I was all set. Thank you.
Okay, great. Ed?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Bill, for this update. I guess one of the concerns that I have is what sort of recourse do we have toward National Grid? I'm clearly not a big fan of this project, I think, as most people realize, but setting that aside, I feel like we as a town have shouldered so much of this for so long, and I can't imagine that there wasn't the ability, especially by National Grid, to have better anticipated what we could be running into. This certainly isn't the first crossing that they would have dealt with, but I feel like we've really borne the brunt of that, and it doesn't feel fair or appropriate that our town personnel, our resources, our residents, should be this inconvenience for this long. I mean, it's having significant impacts on residents' daily lives, and the businesses are getting crushed by this. And I just feel like there has to be some sort of recourse that we can pursue with National Grid, because this should, frankly, I think this should have been anticipated better. It doesn't appear that it was, and ultimately this is their project that really prompted this. So, what is the recourse that we have at this point? I don't know if it's a question for Mr. Mullen or Mr. Mayo or Mr. Renault or all three of you. What can we do? Because I feel like, obviously getting this open is our top priority, but going back and then trying to figure out, in some way find some sort of remedy that's appropriate, some reasonable recourse, I think is really step 2 in this.
Steve, do you want me to take a stab at that?
I want you to take a stab, sure.
Sure. So unfortunately, the situation isn't caused by National Grid. I mean, they what ended up happening is that they have inspectors that were involved when during the open cut. They had some inspectors that actually showed up to look at our quiet zone as a whole, and they've been doing that across the whole Northeast. They have a new inspection arm that looked at it. So when the town initially applied for the quiet zone, which is what I had presented way back in December, is that the issue was with the submittal that the town provided, not with National Grid. So they realistically, at some point, this would have happened. The question is, we would have chose probably which crossing to not install, although we had an accident on Broadway back in the day. So that actually raised the risk level of the Broadway crossing. So that's why it just happens to be coincidental between the two. It really is not an issue with National Grid.
So did we have the cut because of National Grid?
We had the cut because of National Grid. Actually, the cut was because of MBTA. MBTA made them open cut rather than push the pipe through, which is what was originally proposed to you folks back when you approved the grant location.
Right, but I guess what I'm saying is, but MBTA made National Grid cut it in a certain way that then prompted an inspector to come out. So if you kind of trace it back, it was MBTA's instruction based upon National Grid's initiative. If we didn't, for example, if we didn't have the National Grid project, then we wouldn't have had to have made the cut when we did in the way that we did, which wouldn't have brought the inspector out. So I guess what I'm getting at is, I do see it as related to the National Grid project, because National Grid is the impetus behind the actions that were subsequently taken because of their work, right? I mean, that's a fair assessment.
Yeah, well, I mean, we have other peer communities. Well, I wouldn't say peer, but I mean, Chelsea has a situation that they have basically they lost their quiet zone because they didn't follow up. So what we did here is that we shut this off, filed with FRA to make sure that we maintained our quiet zone based on our initial filing. Chelsea had similar situations with their filing, and they didn't take the same steps that we did. They've since then have actually lost their quiet zone, and they won't be able to regain it. So, I see the correlation between the National Grid doing the cutting and the inspector being out here, but at some point the inspector was going to come through here. The inspector would have identified this deficiency in the initial submittal, and this would have been something that we had to deal with. So, just unfortunately, I think the timing just all happened to be at the same time, and ultimately it's still the town's requirement to make sure that we file properly. So we've done that now, and we're gonna, advance the next phase of it. So, I mean, when I talked back in December, we also talked about the installation of quad gates and looking at that to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Because again, we're just below the threshold for the risk threshold to eliminate the horns. So any other accident in town that involves train tracks would be a concern within a 2-year period when we have to refile back. We do a biannual update that was supposed to provide FRA. So there was plenty of times that the town could have fixed this, and unfortunately, we had a submittal, back in early 2000s that wasn't quite up to snuff. And and to be perfectly honest with you, if you read the regulations, I can understand why they would have submitted it the way they did, because it's very poorly written. Whether FRA has changed their interpretation of what those regulations are could be what's going on. But ultimately, as I read it and I talk to the folks that are their enforcement arm, it's abundantly clear that what we did and some of the credits we took weren't we shouldn't have been taking. So that's where we're at. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I think it ultimately goes back to National Grid is the reason that the cut was made. The cut being made prompted the inspection at the time that it did. And I just feel like if we had a little bit more control over that, then I think we would have been somewhat differently positioned in terms of the amount that this street has been offline. And that's what concerns me. So I still see National Grid as prompting the situation as we find ourselves in now. Yeah, sure, it could an inspector have come if you're saying that was increased, of course, and probably would have at some point. But we know that the inspector came because of the MBTA mandate, because of what National Grid is doing there now. So that's I guess where my concern lies in terms of what recourse we have with respect to National Grid. And I can't imagine that National Grid wasn't aware, if they did their due diligence about this crossing, to know or at least be able to flag us in a more proactive way that this is going to be an issue or could be an issue. So, hey, heads up. And these are some, ways that you can, try to remediate the impact on the community. And I just feel like, we were, kind of caught, blind with this. And I understand you're doing your best, and our town team has been doing its best, but it just feels like, there was a real missed opportunity to have had a much more coordinated, organized way that I think would have had far less impact on residents and the businesses there.
Julie.
So my question is really one of logistics. So once we get the sign off, how long will it take to open that? Is there a long process?
No, 3 days.
3 days.
Yep.
3
As soon
days.
as soon as we get the sign off, that means it can open up as soon as we install the islands back.
Okay,
That's-
so
that's
it's
the
some
way of
installation of
submitting.
things that were taken out, and we can't do that prior to getting the sign off.
Where the tracks are, it doesn't really work. Unfortunately, I'm not the tracks, the fencing. So because we have to block it off. So there's essentially a 3-day turnover, and we can try to fast track that potentially even to 2 days. But
Okay.
That's what I would say is probably the best we can do.
I mean, clearly, we all want it up as fast as we can, so thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bill. Paul.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just a little bit confused right now. Bill, please let me understand something right now. When you submitted your paperwork to the FRA back last year, December of last year, was that to keep the quiet zone in that area? Okay,
Yep.
so
No, for the town.
For the town.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you initiated that initiated the inspectors to come out and actually do a review of the track, correct?
No, that was happening beforehand. So they gave us a notice that there was an issue.
How long ago?
That would have been in November. October, November, somewhere in that time frame. Yep.
So when they did their inspection across the country, when they came to the Northeast, they said, okay, we need to inspect these tracks in these communities because there's a quiet zone in place.
Well, it's a little different than that because they have a Northeast region that does the inspection.
Right.
Yeah, but they didn't have an inspection arm previously, so they've hired a few people to go over around different quadrants of the country, essentially, if you want to look at it that way. So they were already working at the time they were working in Maine. They had already come down and looked at Chelsea. I mentioned that already.
Yep.
So they were looking in the general area, I guess is how I would say it.
Okay, did they coming to Wakefield have anything to do with the fact that we were working on the track?
Well, it's more of a communication component with MBTA, and so MBTA is involved with FRA, and they're the ones that handle the quiet zone components. So the communications between those two entities really. So National Grid's not involved in that conversation. It's more that the MBTA had to figure out because they have to blow the horns when there's construction going on the track. So that was part of how it all.
I'm fully aware of that end of it.
Yeah, right. So that's the driver really.
When National Grid came down Broadway and they said that they were going to jack underneath like they wanted to, and then the MBTA said, "Would you mind if we cut the track out and did our repair work? And while we had the track out, you could put your pipe work in." It wasn't the fact that National Grid was going through; it was the fact that the MBTA said, "We're removing the track completely."
No, MBTA required them to do an open cut as part of their construction. That was what happened. So they said that
they replaced the track.
They didn't want them to jack it, but National Grid had to pay for that to happen. That wasn't something that MBTA was planning to do.
National Grid paid for the
track replacement in that area. Yeah.
Really?
Oh yeah, and the monitoring and all that that's going on.
I thought that was a request of the T.
No, so as they got their MBTA permits, just like they get the permit from you, the grant of location, they have to do a similar situation with the T. When they went through that process, they said, we don't want you to jack because there can be too many issues that happen, with the other utilities that are underneath it. We think it makes more sense to open cut. There was also opportunity for the town to get a redundant sleeve in there to allow our water supply to stay active too. So there were some benefits to having that open cut, and we were able to negotiate National Grid to pay for essentially a water main relay between the tracks and the treatment plant, and that was on their dime. So I mean, they that was about a $300,000 nugget that they covered.
Bill, I thank you for your due diligence in trying to remediate this issue on Broadway. The businesses have suffered, the residents have suffered all this time. I know firsthand for experience with the FRA, so I know how much of a stickler they can be. And I respect all the work that you're trying to do for us, and I want to thank you for it.
Great, thank you.
Jonathan, briefly, I assume?
Very, very briefly, just an observation, really, as we look forward, I'm mindful of what Mr. Renaud stated, that, we still are just below the threshold where we're allowed to maintain our quiet zone status, I think, until we make some other improvements. And so I just wanted to make the observation that as we're planning ahead and as we're looking at potentially Recovery Act dollars coming from the federal government, this to me feels like an area that, we should be looking at closely as we think about opportunities for leveraging those dollars. What I don't want to see, I mean, we've talked about how this has been an unpredictable situation. What I don't want to see is sort of an accident in one of our crossings that puts us above that threshold, that again puts us in a place where we have to close a crossing without having any control. So I hope that's something that we can talk about as we get more information about the stimulus dollars and figure out again what's the best and most responsible way of using those funds. So, thank you.
Great, thank you, Jonathan. Bill, thank you so much.
Great, thanks everyone. Have a great night. Thank you.
You as well. Thank you for our state delegation for being so patient. We have Senator Lewis, Representatives Lieber, Garabedian, and Wong. So if they would like to jump on, and I don't know if you have some thoughts and then any questions from the counselors.
I'm happy to kind of kick us off, if that's okay. This is Senator Jason.
Perfect.
Thank you, Chair Santos. It's great to be with you all, along with my colleagues, Representative Lieber, Garabedian, Representative Wong. Always good to have a chance to give you an update, and certainly happy to hear your feedback for us and answer questions. I want to start by thanking all of you for your leadership and your incredible hard work to help steer Wakefield community through this incredibly challenging past year with the pandemic, both a public health crisis and an economic crisis for our communities, and obviously it's still ongoing. So thank you all for your leadership. Of course, nothing more important for getting us out of the pandemic than getting all of our residents vaccinated. And it was unfortunately a very rocky rollout, in our state, but we have gotten things, I think, more back on track. And as of today, 26% of all, 26% of our residents are fully vaccinated. And I think we're one of the leading states in the country now. And half of all adults have gotten at least their first shot. So that's pretty good. And half of all adults have at least the first dose of Pfizer or Moderna. And just to make sure folks know that as of next Monday, eligibility opens up to all adults 16 years and older will be eligible for vaccination. You can pre-register through the state pre-registration site. So I encourage anybody who hasn't done that already to please pre-register and please get vaccinated, as soon as you can when, if you're, once eligibility opens up for you. The state legislature, my colleagues in the delegation, myself and others, obviously in the past year, we've been very focused on our pandemic response, the public health aspects of it, the economic aspects of it, but we've also continued to address other critical priorities. And just a few quick legislative updates from the last few months. A major economic development and housing bill the work on that was completed early this year, signed by Governor Baker. It provides $600 million in various economic development programs for our communities, including grants for small businesses. It has assistance for our arts and cultural sector, which has been hit so hard by the pandemic. It capped the restaurant delivery fees, which was another part of our strategy to help our restaurants to survive. And it also made some changes to our zoning laws, so that now to change zoning for housing development only requires a majority vote in town meeting rather than a 2/3 vote. So you may well be aware of that already, but that's to try to help support some of the smart growth and transit-oriented development we need in our communities. Another major bill was a transportation bond bill $16 billion for the next 5 years, which has been appropriated now for road work, bridge work, and that includes funding for the Chapter 90 program, which is local funding for local roads and bridges. I know how important that is to all of you and our residents in Wakefield. So that was good news that that got done. Also finally finished work on a major landmark climate bill. Took a while of back and forth with the governor, but we did eventually reach agreement with him, and that's very exciting. It puts Massachusetts in the forefront, really globally, of our efforts to wean ourselves off of fossil fuels and move to a clean energy economy. I actually think we have an amazing opportunity to lead the world in offshore wind energy development. There's major potential off our coast, and it's going to bring significant job creation and economic development to Massachusetts in the years ahead. So there's a lot in that bill that affects communities. It affects our municipal light plants, like we have in Wakefield. They will be subject to clean energy requirements for the first time, which Wakefield's Muni's already been working towards. But happy to talk in more detail another time if you have any, or if you have questions, because that bill is very significant for our communities in our state. We also passed a bill that I filed to extend mail-in voting. It was supposed to expire at the end of March, and I filed a bill along with Representative Brad Jones, and that got passed. So that's important to Wakefield, of course, because your municipal election is the end of April, and so that means you can still do mail-in voting for that election. We are also pushing to make mail-in and early voting permanent even after the pandemic, but that's something that we'll likely take up later in the legislative session. And then just recently, we passed another COVID relief bill, which is designed to limit unemployment insurance rate increases for our businesses, something that was very important to our business community. It also provides some tax relief for businesses from their PPP loans, also for low-income residents to get some tax relief from their unemployment insurance benefits, and also emergency paid sick time for workers who don't have adequate sick time. That's a very important public health measure. The governor is seeking some changes to that, so we're still negotiating that with the governor, but I expect that will be done in the next week or so. So there's a lot of other legislative work that my colleagues may want to touch on also, but I will stop there. Quick update on the fiscal year 22 budget, which is always very important to all of us. I'm definitely more optimistic than I was a few months ago about where we are fiscally at the state level. Our tax revenues have actually held up way better than any of the economists predicted. So that's good news. And then as part of the American Rescue Plan, the state is receiving several $billions. That's in addition to the money that towns and cities are receiving, that school departments are receiving, and various other programs. So we're feeling much better, about the fiscal outlook for fiscal year 22 and for fiscal year 23 as well. Last week, you may be aware the Senate and House announced a local aid resolution. And so that is very good news because that gives you all certainty about what you can expect in local aid for the next fiscal year. So you don't have to wait till June or even into the summer, like is the case in some fiscal years. So the numbers for Wakefield in unrestricted local aid, it will be $3.7 million, and that's the same as the governor's budget in January. That's I think about a 3.5% increase in that account. So that's $125,000 increase for Wakefield. Again, that's consistent with what the governor proposed. In Chapter 70, the amount that Wakefield will be receiving is approximately $6.8 million. That's a $102,000 increase over last year. That's also the same as the governor, but there's a major difference in the legislature's plans versus the governor. The governor did not do anything to account for the enrollment decline. We've seen a decline in Wakefield public schools and across the state due largely to the pandemic. The governor did not do anything in his budget to account for that. In the local aid resolution, the legislature has committed to create a new enrollment reserve account, and we will be funding that with at least $40 million. We may add to that later if necessary. But based on what enrollment we see in the fall when students come back to school, we will then that money will get apportioned out to our school districts based on the enrollment. So that will provide some additional funding to, I expect, to Wakefield from that reserve account. In addition, Wakefield Public Schools are receiving approximately $1.5 million in federal money. This is from 3 rounds of federal grants. They're known as ESSER, ESSER 1, ESSER 2, which were both last year, and then the American Rescue Plan, the President Biden's bill, is ESSER 3. That all adds up to $1.5 million that's going directly to Wakefield schools. That's separate and apart from the money that the town is receiving, also from the American Rescue Plan, which is very substantial. That's, I think it's about another $7 million. So this is a separate pot of money. In addition, my colleagues and I will continue to advocate forcefully for full implementation of the other aspects of the Student Opportunity Act. Remember, it wasn't just Chapter 70 changes, also the special education circuit breaker. So we're going to now be adding transportation costs for students who have to be transported out of district. That's a very big expense for Wakefield schools. We're now going to be adding in reimbursement for that, and we're going to make sure that that is included in the House and Senate budget as well, the first year of that. And then charter school tuition reimbursements. We are, as you know, considerable number of Wakefield students who attend the Mystic Valley Charter School. And so Wakefield has to send tuition for those students. We want to make sure the state is providing as much, the reimbursement that we're supposed to be providing. So that, again, will be another part of the Student Opportunity Act that we will be advocating to make sure it's implemented. And then I also just want to remind everybody that another piece of the Student Opportunity Act, which again was signed into law in 2019, was to increase funding for the Massachusetts School Building Authority by $200 million a year. So allowing them to spend, rather than $600 million a year on school buildings, they could spend $800 million. And that was one of the factors that allowed them to expand the number of projects they could accept, and was one of the factors that helped get the Wakefield High School project accepted into the MSBA program. So that was another benefit to the town from the Student Opportunity Act from a few years ago. Quickly, just a few other quick updates. The delegation was very pleased that Wakefield received $122,000, a grant for shared streets and spaces. That was a new COVID program. And I know that's being used for improvements to Main Street for enhancements. So that was very good. And also you might be interested to know that 79 Wakefield small businesses have received state assistance grants. Again, this is through money appropriated by the legislature and Governor Baker's administration. These are grants provided through the Mass Growth Capital Corporation, and they total about $4 million. So that, again, about 79 Wakefield businesses have gotten grants totaling about $4 million to help them get through the pandemic, hopefully stay in business, of course, continue to provide jobs and serve the community. And that's separate from federal dollars like the Paycheck Protection Program, which has also been hugely instrumental to keeping our businesses and restaurants afloat. Some very good news on the MBTA front, but I'm going to leave that for Representative Lieber, who's been a key champion on MBTA service and restoring it. So she's going to talk to you about that. And then the last thing I wanted to mention was back to the MSBA again. It's great news that the Wakefield High School is in the program. And also you're probably aware that Northeast Vocational School is in the process of building a new high school up the road from Wakefield High School, which is badly needed, everybody agrees, but it is a lot of money. And that is going to fall on all the sending communities to fund that project. So we recognize that that's a significant, cost to both Wakefield taxpayers, for both Wakefield's high school and the Northeast. So I did want you to know that one of my top priorities this legislative session, you may know, in addition to representing Wakefield, I also chair the Education Committee for the legislature, for the Senate. One of my priorities is to try to pursue reforms of the Massachusetts School Building Authority program. So I mentioned the Student Opportunity Act increased essentially how much they can spend each year, which is very helpful, but that still doesn't address some of the challenges like the reimbursement rate that they provide to districts. And so because that reimbursement rate, many people feel is not adequate, it shifts more of the cost burden onto local communities and local taxpayers. So there's a variety of issues related to that. Just wanted you to know that's on our radar screen. And we are working with a number of my colleagues to look at options for improving and strengthening the MSBA program, ultimately with the goal of being able to add more projects into the program and relieve some of the burden that otherwise falls on local communities. So I'll stop there, but I'm happy again to answer questions.
Thanks so much, Senator Lewis. We'll take questions at the end. Representative Wong, do you want to say a few words?
Okay, let me unmute. Okay, thank you. I just want to remind people, if you filed your state taxes already, and if you did get PPP money, and if you did pay it, you can get a rebate now because we voted to not have the state tax the PPP. And a lot has already been said, but I also want to let you know that the last week of April is our budget week. And the state delegation worked with Steve Mayo, and we'll be trying to get more money for them. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Representative Wong. Representative Lieber.
Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see you. I've seen a number of you in person recently, all masked up as we've walked around downtown to celebrate some of the staples of our great business community and our local restaurants. And it's hope the rest of you are well also. It's quite incredible that it's been a year since the three of us were with you. It feels like a lifetime ago and yesterday in some ways, but I hope you all are well. And it's been a real pleasure to work with all of you over the last year and to learn from you and think about ways to strengthen the state-local partnership. So thank you for all that you're doing and very much for being in touch with me about your ideas and questions. So there's not a lot to add to the Senator's comprehensive overview, which was hopefully really helpful. He did mention the MBTA, and I know a number of you joined us in pushing back on some of the proposed service cuts that were brought forward by the MBTA. I believe it might have been in mid-fall. And you may recall they were quite draconian in nature. There was a complete elimination of one of the bus lines serving Wakefield. There was also the closure of the Cedar Park commuter rail station in Melrose along the commuter rail line that obviously Wakefield commuters use as well. And so thanks to your advocacy and ours, a lot of those most draconian cuts were put off and were not accepted in the final proposal. So that included writing letters. I know the town submitted one as well, and then showing up to a number of public hearings and speaking there. And I remember a couple of you were with me on an occasion. So I was really pleased with that. Currently, as you may know, the 136 and 137 buses continue to run, but they have been consolidated into one large loop. And so when I learned about that, I reached out to just understand the rationale for that. And in fact, the times between the buses are shorter that way than if they were to try to reduce the amount of route on both and keep both of them open. So I know that there was a public hearing about that. I've been in touch with Mr. Mayo just to confirm that, we're not hearing a lot of concern about that, but it's something certainly we want to keep an eye on, including as the vaccination rollout continues, a lot of more people may be returning to commuting. So we want to make sure that service comes back online quickly. And to that point, the MBTA within the last month has acknowledged and confirmed that it will be bringing all service back to pre-pandemic levels as quickly as possible. I think this is large part in light of the federal investment through the American Recovery Plan, which is really great news. At the same time, we'd like to sort of see real concrete commitment to that. So I'm a member of the MBTA caucus, and I think the senator and perhaps the representative are as well. We signed on to a letter that went to Governor Baker asking for a clear timeline and a commitment to swift return to service. Just today, the MBTA committed to bringing some bus lines back that have been completely eliminated. Obviously, Wakefield's not in that position, luckily, but we'll keep an eye out and see if we can figure out when the 136 and 137 will resume normal course of business, as well as when we'll see return to more trains on the commuter rail. I believe there's also a commitment to more frequent Orange Line trains coming in the summer. So all of this is good news. As you all know, the Wakefield is, really lucky to have access to these different types of mass transit, and we want to continue to ensure that folks have the ability to ride them when they need them. In addition to that, I'll just echo what the senator and the representative said about our budget process. So this Wednesday, the House Ways and Means bill will be released. So that is the proposed House budget bill. We will have about 48 hours until Friday at 5 p.m. to submit amendments. And so as the representative mentioned, we've been in touch with some of you and with the town manager to hear about local investment opportunities that you'd like us to prioritize. So we'll look to see if there are opportunities to do that through amendment proposals. And then we'll take up the budget debate in the last week of April, at which point we'll complete a budget bill in the House. It will then head to the Senate. The Senate will have its timeline, and then we'll do a reconciliation with the hope of having a final budget by the time the fiscal year begins on July 1st. But that local aid resolution last week does provide you all with quite a bit of ability to forecast what is likely to be the type of state revenue that you will see. I've been also in touch with Superintendent Lyons just to talk a little bit about the enrollment issue. And he's been very, responsive and helpful and attuned to that. So I agree with the senator. It's something we definitely want to be mindful of. In speaking with House leadership, they are aware that the $40 million, is a solid estimate of what we might need to address enrollment, but they've expressed at least a willingness to increase that amount through supplemental budgets as we get a better grasp of how many students really are returning to school in the fall. I guess one other thing I'll just say is maybe when we met last year, I can't recall where we were in the process of getting your home rule petition enacted and to the governor's desk, but I was so thrilled to work with the senator and Representative Wong to make that happen, and thrilled, that over 100 senior households have been able to take advantage of that. And so a bill that I'm excited to have filed this year, and the senator filed it on the Senate side, and we worked with your town assessor, who is a wonderful resource to thinking about this, was to suggest that we update the state law to say that when municipalities wish to reapportion their property tax distribution, they should be able to do that as a matter of local option rather than have to make it a home rule petition. Because I'm mindful that you all passed that months before it finally got enacted. And in that time, a number of seniors in the community could really have appreciated the tax relief. So we'll see where that goes in this legislative session, but I'm glad to have been able to use Wakefield as a model of why this would be an appropriate state policy change. So thank you for your leadership there.
Great. Thanks so much, Representative. Do any members of the council have questions for any of our delegation? Paul.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To my esteemed representation, I want to thank you for being here tonight. I have one final request in my capacity as a counselor to the lovely town of Wakefield. I would like a commitment from the three of you to do something about my request for the last 15 years to remediate the potential flooding issue along the Saugus and Mill River in Wakefield. It's fallen on deaf ears. I've asked numerous times of all three representatives, maybe not the current ones. I'll eliminate Representative Garabedian because she's new, but I know the rest of you have heard this plea. Okay, you mentioned Chapter 90 money. You mentioned the whole the House Ways and Means Committee amendment proposals. We need money to clean out the Mill and Saugus rivers so that the water freely flows out of Wakefield. We have two major projects coming into Wakefield. You just mentioned both the high school and the Northeast Vocational School. Both of them have the potential of increasing the water capacity towards the Mill River. That is only 200 yards from my house. This is personal now, folks. 15 years I've been asking for help from the legislature. I've gotten nothing but crickets. I'm fed up. So I'm directing this to all of you personally. You're ignoring the fact that we can't do this on our own. Get the Army Corps of Engineers in here. They'll gladly do it. It's a navigable river. The people from Salem Street down to Water Street who live on the Saugus River, they're complaining too, but it falls on deaf ears. 1990, there was a study done. It's collecting dust on someone's shelf right now. This is an important issue, but it seems to be only important to me. I'm going to make it important to all three of you now, because I will be that little gnat in your ear from now until the day I disappear, okay? I would like your support in your assistance in getting this matter resolved. The DPW just did a study not too long ago where they did a complete analysis of what would be needed to make the water freely flow out of Wakefield. Please, we need assistance. This has to get done because the next major rainfall that comes along, when my yard is completely flooded, I'm going to be knocking on your door to help you, have you help me bail out my house. This has to get solved somehow. So please listen to my plea. You've been great all along on all other matters. I wrote down everything that Senator Lewis has told us. Money's coming in a lot of different areas. Nothing's getting given to us to alleviate the flooding problems in this area of town. So if you could do something, I would greatly appreciate it. Madam Chair, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. My esteemed representatives, thank you for listening to my points.
Thank you, Paul. Jonathan.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the members of our delegation for attending tonight and for your advocacy for our community and everything that you do. I just want to make a comment and then sort of ask a question related to that. As the comment, I really also do want to recognize really the outstanding work from the delegation around advocating for maintenance of public transportation to Wakefield. You know, I had the opportunity to participate in some of the MBTA listening sessions over the course of the winter, and you know, being able to hear Senator Lewis, Representative Lieber, and the two of you talk about the importance of maintaining service and the importance of taking the long view in terms of how MBTA service was really critical to economic recovery in Wakefield and in the surrounding area. I think was tremendous, and I just really want to acknowledge the work that you did in that area because I do think it had an impact. A question related to that, though, you know, as we are looking at infrastructure dollars, hopefully coming from the federal government at some point, and as we are looking at the potential to make kind of investments of potentially a large scale, what's your sense or what's your vision in terms of transit investments that we might be able to see over the next several years that could benefit our community, or what would you like to prioritize as some of these hopefully these dollars start to materialize?
I mean, I can start, and it'll be sort of just a thought, you know, a train of thought, but I appreciate the question. Obviously, there is the promise of perhaps a federal infrastructure bill, but we'll see how that works its way through Congress and a new administration, but critically important and really could be a bipartisan win for the country, certainly. At the state level, as the senator mentioned, we did just pass a transportation bond bill, so that authorizes spending in this space. There also, just prior to my time joining the House had taken a vote on raising revenue to support mass transit. So it's possible we will take some of that conversation up into the new session. For me, it's sort of, a focus on access, which obviously was under deep threat recently, but we have reason to think that that's coming back online. But even, the returning to a new normal, I would love to see access even, more expanded than we had pre-COVID, which is something that there seemed to be a lot of appetite for in Wakefield when I was campaigning. There's also the question of quality. So there's a concern that we have these new trains, and I know the chair and I were so excited about getting to ride the Orange Line on these new trains when we were commuting daily down to the city. And of course, they're offline again. And I've been, I've had conversations with engineers on the MBTA in the last month just to sort of inquire about how concerned should we be about this, how typical is this, and just asked, to be kept in, to contact about updates on that. So there's the access, there's the quality, and there's the affordability piece to ensure that we incent people to take mass transit because it has many wins for us as a community. It helps, with our environmental goals. It helps with keeping, the value of our homes and our communities high when people are using a mass transit that sort of brings people in and out. One thing I'd be interested in focusing on is a greater electrification of the fleet. So to meet our climate goals, we're going to need to really address where we are, using fossil fuels and how to replace those with cleaner energy. So thinking about electric buses, considering the degree to which our rails can be electrified in some ways. That's one thing that comes to mind. And I'm sure after I stop speaking, I'll think of several more. But also, of course, always looking forward to talking to the town councilors because you have great insight on this as well.
I'll ditto everything Representative Lipigar said. Great overview. And I just would say, right now we're digging ourselves out of our hole, right? Everything we've been talking about is just saving service and getting it back to where we were. We're not done when we do that. We have to think about what the next generation of world-class public transit looks like for Wakefield and the whole greater Boston region. That's the key to our future. It's the key to our environmental future, our economic future, our public health future is world-class public transit. Convenient, safe, fast, reliable, all forms of transit. And we've got a long way to go, but that's what we have to aim for.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I hope that as we think about the future and as we think about coming out of COVID and the recovery that means, I think from a transit perspective, if we find ourselves a year from now, sort of sitting in the same traffic on Boston area highways as we did beforehand, I think that's a failure for us. I fully supportive of the ideas, Representative Lipigar that you mentioned. I'd also add accessibility to that list as well. And I know that's something I hear from constituents in Wakefield is the lack of accessibility at the, for the commuter rail stop and the hope that might be an area that we can see some improvement sooner rather than later. But again, thank you for your advocacy, all three of you, and appreciate all your work.
Thank you, Jonathan. Maureen.
Hello, delegation. I'm sitting here like, do I ask them about my day job work questions or no? Do I keep it Wakefield? I will keep it Wakefield. Echoing what everyone said, thank you all for all that you've done for us. And to echo what Jonathan said, the infrastructure, transportation is just so important, our roads and how we commute to the city once we get back to relatively normal. I'm going to go on the other side of infrastructure and just remind you not to forget, as you talked, Jason, Senator Lewis, you mentioned the 26% have gotten vaccinated, and we're not there yet. And so just don't forget people. And as you're doing the budget and we're trying to get on recovery, just to really keep an eye on seniors, those of us that are housing insecure, those of us who have lost jobs. Your offices have helped people with unemployment, and just know that people are hurting and everything that you can do. This even in Wakefield, just to think about vaccine equity. I know you have all heard how great our vaccine clinics were, and then the state kind of changed the model, and I worry about how we're going to get up to that 70% when it's not when we just can't directly reach out to those people. So I worry about vaccine equity and people of color and low-income people, housing insecure people not getting that. So just want you to think about that, and any way that we can partner in making sure we get to the other side and protect those most vulnerable among us, that would be really great. That's it. Just don't forget about those folks.
Donald.
Okay. I just want to comment on that because the we're now going to the homebound elderly, and we're using Johnson & Johnson, so it's a one-shot deal. And I hope that we can get to more people that way.
Great, thank you.
That's a great point. I know that Health Director Clay, when I spoke with her, you know, there were a number of municipalities that sort of delegated that to the state, but I believe Wakefield said, no, we can do that here. And that's a testament to the strong local board of health and health director and just the town management as well. So that's a really important part that the representative mentioned. And yes, to your point, Councillor, but I think you have your comments fall on receptive ears among the three of us. We very much know we're not out of the woods yet. There is still a lot of work to do to get to a full recovery. And there are lots of people for whom there remain many, many challenges. And so we're certainly attuned to that.
Thank you.
And I can definitely assure all of you, we are very forcefully advocating with Secretary Sutters, who heads the COVID Command Center, and Governor Baker's team, that as we continue to get more vaccine doses, and you know that has been increasing, that we need to make sure it's accessible locally as much as possible, and that there are, as Councilor Butt described, you know, very specific outreach programs for people who may be difficult to reach otherwise, like people who are homebound or who may have vaccine hesitancy, that we want to make sure we're reaching them, educating them, making sure they get access to the vaccines as well. This is a public health crisis, and the only way we get out of it is if we get, you know, enough, the vast majority of people, you know, vaccinated.
Thank you. Julie.
Thank you. I just wanted to again thank you all for being very for your perseverance in getting the climate bill passed. I know that was not easy, and I think in the end it really came out as a better bill probably than the first of the 3 rounds that it went through. I'm particularly pleased, Jason, as you mentioned, that municipal light departments for the very first time actually have a renewable standard and a climate standard. So that's really, really important. I hope that we continue to encourage them to meet intermittent goals, getting to the 2050, and not build some things that they might have on their books. So be coming to you to help with that. And I just really think that at the municipal level, we can do so much to help with climate change. I actually see some parallels with what Paul is mentioning with, you know, river and drainage, and those are going to become issues as we have climate. And so we need to think about them, maybe not just in kind of their immediate and certainly bothersome state, but that they are going to be, there's going to need to be places where water can go. And we have lakes and we have rivers, and that's going to be part of our infrastructure. So, and just kind of tying it back, Representative Lieber, as you mentioned, certainly transportation is going to be part of reaching our climate goals. I did a walking tour of Salem Street area this weekend, and we have a lot of development going in over there and a lot of concerns about traffic. And it seems to me that once we can kind of shore up our transportation system, we really need to be looking to expanding routes. And I would say that Salem Street corridor going out to Market Street and Linfield all the way down is a perfect corridor. You know, no matter what goes up to the top of the lake right now, there's a tremendous amount of electricity capacity there because it used to be a data center, and maybe it can be an electric vehicle transportation hub or something like that. So I think we have some really creative things that we can do here in Wakefield, and I will look for your support on that. So thank you very much for your leadership on climate.
Thanks, Julie. Ed.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, delegation, for taking the time tonight. It was great seeing Representatives Lieber and Wong when we welcomed Senator Markey last week. And I think what really struck me from that opportunity with him is what Representative Lieber had to say about the collaboration and the opportunities we have, you know, at the federal, state, and local levels. And I'm encouraged, you know, with that mindset, and I know that Representative Wong was of a similar mindset, you know, when we were talking last week. And, you know, I just think that we in Wakefield, we do a lot of things so well. We're really good stewards of tax dollars. When we get grants, when we get, resources that come into town, we're really good with how we use them, and we can improve the quality of life, for our residents here in a really meaningful way. And we also have our ears closest to the ground, of anyone. And so we're also great sounding boards as you're working through and doing your work at the state level. And I'm just incredibly proud of the work that we do here in the town, and given the opportunity, we excel at it. And I know that not all communities can say that. And I think we have a strong delegation. I think we have very effective representation. And I just want you to just never forget that, we are here, and if we get the chance, if anything can come down to our level, and we can execute on it, and probably execute really well. And I look at Mr. Mayo specifically with the vaccine clinic. I mean, that was masterfully done, and that was all because of a great team effort at our town level. And there are a lot of things, a lot of projects we work on here in town. If we get a grant that comes in, we're effective, we're efficient. We end up turning around a really impressive product. And as Representative Lieber mentioned too, the home rule petition, serving as a model for other communities. We do a lot of that work in a lot of different ways, and we'd love to share more of it with you. But please understand that we are, I'm really proud of how we operate this town, how we manage, and the kind of impact we can make. And so any resources that can be directed our way will certainly be, as best, spent as they can be. So I just really encourage all of you to keep that dialogue going. I really like that concept. We hear so much about infrastructure now. We have a lot of great ideas here, and we can execute on them. We've got some great plans too. So please, let's, you are the conduit, for us in so many ways. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Well, thank you all, Senator Lewis, Representative Wong, and Representative Lieber. I know it's a late night for you and your hard work entering into the budget season. So thank you so much for coming to just chat with us and share updates from what's happening.
Thank you for having us.
Nice to be with you all. Good night.
All right.
Thank you for inviting us.
Absolutely. Have a nice night. Next, we will move on to my agenda fell off. Appointments. Annual appointments to the various boards, committees, and commissions, item number 13. I think we should take them in order of how Sherry masterfully organized them in our packet. So the Advisory Board of Public Works, we have one position to fill. There were 2 applications. Does anyone have a motion? Strike that. I also want to present information that the President Advisory Board of Public Works has recommended to us that Christopher Tarr be reappointed based on the work he has done. Do we have Ed?
I move that Christopher Tarr be reappointed to the Advisory Board of Public Works.
Great. Do we have a second, and then we can have discussion if anyone chooses?
Second.
Second by Jonathan. Any discussion? Seeing none, and as always, we appreciate anyone who applies to be a member of the board, and we ask them to keep applying when openings come up. So we have a motion and a second to appoint Chris Tarr to the Advisory Board of Public Works. Myself, yes. Julie?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Ed?
Aye.
Paul? Paul? Can we see him? Okay, 1, 2, 3. Jonathan?
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4. I can count 5. Okay, that's all we need. All right, thank you. Chris Tarr is reappointed to the Advisory Board of Public Works. The second is the Albion Cultural Exchange Committee. There are 4 appointments. We had 1 application received after the deadline. There are 4 openings, so I would suggest that perhaps Doug can be placed as a associate member, alternate. I forget the wording right now.
Madam Chair, if I may just speak a little bit as the liaison to the Albion Cultural Exchange. So, one of the things that the board requested is that they actually add a 5th voting seat for this appointment cycle. And the reason is it's, different from some of our boards, which are more adjudicatory in nature. This is very much a working board. And, really their ability to put on programming, their ability to, really sort of bring out the full potential of the facility is dependent on, the individuals who are on the board doing a lot of that work. And so this is one situation where, many hands make light work. And, given the fact that they had 5 qualified, interested, and engaged candidates, their request to this council was that we appoint all 5, including Mr. Henning, who, while his application was late, my understanding it was not very late, and it was due to some technical issues. And I can say, again, based on attending their meetings pretty frequently, that Doug is a tremendous asset to the board, contributes very effectively, is very engaged, particularly in keeping their website up and running. And so I do think there's value to us as the appointing body in actually appointing all 5 members as voting issues. And I, in fact, would make a motion that we do so.
Sure. Any second on that motion prior to discussion?
Second.
Second by Maureen. Jonathan, I agree with you. In talking to members of the committee that are presently not up for reappointment, some of them, they absolutely need extra hands. So I think adding a 5th person to the committee that can help out someone who is obviously so active, as you've stated, is pretty easy. So Sherry, can we do this? Can we do this fairly easy?
Yeah.
Just add, okay. Ed.
We've had this issue come up a number of times now regarding just growing the voting members of various committees, boards, commissions. I don't disagree that many hands make for light work, and I don't disagree that this is a working board, but I see no reason why we consistently need to be adding more voting members in order to have this a working board. I mean, we have voting members and we have non-voting members. I mean, Permanent Building Committee, I think, is a great example of that. ZBA is another example of that. Those are adjudicatory boards and they have non-voting members. But I don't understand why, if someone doesn't have a vote, they're not going to be as engaged, involved, or volunteering as a working member. And I think we need to stop this practice of just continuing to have this creep of voting members, for every single time it comes up. I think in the last probably 4 or 5 meetings, we've probably done this at least 3 times. We had the same issue with the veterans. The idea of having additional members is great, but they all don't need to be voting members. We can have a core group of voting members and an additional number of members. That's great. I love the volunteers. That's awesome. But I don't understand why we continue to feel like the only way that these folks are given value is by giving them, a vote on these various, commissions, committees, and boards. I don't think it works that way, nor should it. And we have some pretty long-standing traditions. And also, not for nothing, but I know that it had been our practice previously that if someone was late with an application, then they weren't even considered. And I know that I'll turn to Madam Clerk on that, because I recall asking you over the years what applications came in on time, which came late, and we've always had a pretty firm deadline. There's ample amount of time to be able to submit these, and I think if someone doesn't submit them on time, then we have to deal with that in a different way. But otherwise, what's the point of having the deadline that a lot of other people have worked very hard to adhere to? Thank you.
Thanks. Jonathan.
Sure, just if I may, I think that it's important to recognize with this board, I will say in the time that I've been the liaison to the board, I think about 95% of the votes that they have taken have been to either approve their own minutes or to adjourn. And so again, I don't think there's really much of a sort of organizational risk here. I'd be mindful, of Councillor Dombrowski's concern if it were a different type of board, or a board that was making, more significant decisions. But again, it's really not. And so I don't see any concern, at least on my end, in going down this route. Again, I've spent a lot of time with this group of individuals, and I think they've been thoughtful about what their needs are as a board and how they'd like to construct that organization, which is why I'm supportive of it. Understand sort of other perspectives that folks may have, but again, just want to share that context as someone who does attend a lot of their meetings and is engaged with the individuals involved right now.
Thanks, Jonathan. I also have none of Ed's concerns for this meeting. I appreciate what he's saying for other groups, but this one, after having visited with some of the members and having talked with them, I have no issue with your motion. Ed?
So if we had 7 people applying, then all of them should be voting members. I mean, it doesn't, like, where does it stop? I mean, again, I in no way am I trying to discourage people from being engaged and volunteering, but the fact that you have the ability to approve minutes or vote to adjourn actually kind of makes the point that it's not that necessary to have all these folks, with this voting capacity. Like, just we have a core group of people that are appointed to vote, and then we have a core group that can be expanded, non-voting members, and in most cases it could probably be unlimited. I would imagine we'd have to go through case by case, but I just don't understand why we keep moving the goalposts for all these committees, boards, and commissions.
Any other comments? I think with some of the newer committees and commissions, ones that have gotten their feet wet in getting into initial projects, perhaps as initially imagined, they realized that an extra body could help. I'm not concerned that adding one body. If there were 3 other names, I agree with you. I'm not saying I would advocate for adding 3 voting members, but I have no problem with this. And if someone wants to, I think we've talked about it, I can take the vote. So the motion is to add a 5th member onto the Albion Cultural Exchange Commission, and to approve the appointment of Kathy Fry, Christopher Carino, Tracy Shea, Anne Marie Gallivan, and Doug Henning. Is there a second? I think Jonathan made that, so.
Correct. I think Councillor Butt had seconded.
Excellent. Thank you.
Just as a point of order, Madam Chair, aren't those 2 separate votes?
Sure, we can do that. So the first vote, can I please have a motion and a second to add another seat to the voting members for Albion Cultural Exchange?
So moved.
Moved by Jonathan.
Second.
Seconded by Julie. I think we've had discussion on it. Roll call vote. Myself, yes. Julie?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Ed?
No.
Paul? Oh, Paul is having technical difficulties. So I don't see him able to vote. Jonathan?
Yes.
Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, I can add. Okay, that passes. So now the second vote that I believe we've made and seconded to appoint the names Kathy Fray, Krista Carino, Tracy Shea, Anne Marie Gallivan, and Doug Henning. Roll call vote. Myself, yes. Julie?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Paul? Back yet? Nope. And Jonathan?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Capital Planning Committee, we have 3 people applied for 2 spots. And Dan McGrath, who is head of Wakefield Recreation, sent, oh, wrong person. I mean, wrong group, sorry.
Frank Leone.
I know Frank Leone is definitely one of them right here. Capital Planning. The recommendation is to have David Whitman and Frank Leone appointed to the board. Can I have a motion in a second? Ed, discussion?
No, so moved for David Whitman and Franklin Leone to the 2 spots available.
Second?
Second.
And roll call vote on adding David Whittam and Frankie Leone to the capital planning committee. Myself, yes. Julie?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Paul, do we have you?
Yes.
Okay. Jonathan?
Yes.
Excellent.
And sorry about that. Did you see Frank Leone's recommendation?
Yep.
Yes, so Madam Chair, in light of that, I did want to separately move, or really just to start the discussion, make a motion that we honor the request to add 2 new voting seats to the Capital Planning Committee, and further move to appoint Frank Conti and Jeffrey Giunta to those 2 meetings, with my apologies that I think I just mispronounced Jeffrey's last name.
Giunta.
Thank you.
And Frank Leone cites the article that was adopted on May 3rd, 1993, listing a committee of 7 to determine present and future capital needs. How many are on the committee now, Sherry?
Let's see.
7?
I believe there are 5.
There are 5. So this motion is simply consistent with what was passed at town meeting.
That's correct. That's my understanding.
Okay.
There's 6 on the committee right now.
Sherry, if I'm not mistaken, I think Jeffrey's on as a non-voting member, but there are 5 voting.
There's 5 voting and Jeffrey's a non-voting member. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So I think that makes sense based on Frank's memo to us that the committee should be 7. And with that, adding Frank Conti and Jeff Giunta as the voting members to that 7, to fill out the 7 on the committee. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right.
All right. Any, so Jonathan moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay. All in favor of adding Frank Conti and Jeff Giunta as voting members? Myself, yes. Julie?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Ed?
Aye.
Paul?
Yes.
And Jonathan?
Yes.
Great. Conversation. No, conservation.
There you
God.
go.
Like after 9, I lose my mind. I'm sorry, people. Conservation Commission, we have 3 appointments to make. We have a withdrawal of someone, and then someone who is currently on the commission placed their application after the deadline. Do we know how far after the deadline, Sherry?
It was more than a day. Yes. I can bring, as you guys keep talking, I can bring up when I received it.
Why I might forgive being a little late in this situation is we have 3 to appoint. We would have to come back anyways to fill that 3rd. So we can either appoint, a motion can be made to appoint Teresa Belmonte and Peter Miller, or a motion can be made to appoint Teresa Belmonte, Peter Miller, and Bob Romano, who is currently on the commission.
Madam Chair, I move to
I'll make
appoint.
a motion to do the 3.
I'm sorry, Paul?
I'll make a motion to appoint the 3.
I'll
Thank you.
second that.
Any discussion? All right, seeing none, the appointment of Teresa Belmonte, Peter Miller, and Bob Romano to the Conservation Commission. Myself, yes. Julie?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Ed? Ed?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Jonathan?
Yes.
Thank you. The Council on Aging. We are appointing 2. The letter we received from Judy Luciano recommends the appointment of Maureen Hickey, which I would enthusiastically support. And then we have two other people who are applying who Judy did not speak to either one of them. So I don't know if we want to appoint Maureen and then have a discussion on the remaining two.
Move to appoint Maureen Hickey as
Excellent.
a continuing member to the council.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Seconded by Ed. Any discussion on appointing Maureen? Roll call vote. Myself, yes. Julie?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Ed?
Aye.
Paul?
Yes.
And Jonathan?
Yes.
Excellent. So Maureen is appointed to Council on Aging. Would someone like to suggest, or does someone, based on what was submitted, to suggest the appointment of Joanne Scholars or Julie Brown?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to appoint Joanne Scholar to the Council on Aging in light of her experience as a home health aide working with this population. I think she'd be a great fit.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Paul, moved by Jonathan, seconded by Paul. Any discussion? Seeing none, a motion to appoint Joanne. I'm sorry, Jonathan, is it's Schuyler?
Scholar.
Scholar, sorry about that. Joanne Scholar to the Council on Aging. Myself, yes. Julie?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Ed?
Aye.
Paul?
Yes.
And Jonathan?
Yes.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Just a point of order, please.
Sure.
Would she have to submit paperwork? Her name is currently on the ballot as a candidate for the planning board, as an elected official, and then now she's being appointed by us. So would she have to fill out the same form that Amy Ruine filled out?
That is beyond me. That might be a Tom question.
Yeah.
Mullen?
I'm going to have to think about that. I don't have a copy of 268A section 20 in front of me, and it's pretty complicated stuff. If she wants to give me a call, I'd be happy to talk with her about it.
Okay, so thank you, Tom. Madam Chair, I think that someone would have to notify her of that potential. At least in my eyes. I mean, I don't know how you want to address it, but it just dawned on me as I pulled her name up on Facebook who she was.
Yeah.
So I didn't know if that was a potential issue that the board would rather deal with now than after the fact.
I think Sherry can perhaps let her know to contact Tom Mullen about this concern. And if it turns out to be a conflict based on the law, then she can withdraw.
Okay.
Does that work, Sherry?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, we moving on to the Cultural Council, where we're appointing two members. Does anyone have a motion and a second as to, we have 5 applicants. Oh, Ed, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I nominate Sarah Madeline Gurin for a continued role and Ira Cummings.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right. Good. I have roll call vote on Sarah Madeline Gurin and Ira Cummings to be appointed to the Cultural Council. Myself, yes. Julie?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Jonathan?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Disability Commission, we're appointing 1, and we appoint 1, but there's a recommendation that 2 be appointed. Sherry, does that look right? They're supporting 2, but there's only 1 slot.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Mhm.
So, out of the two, I think we need a motion to appoint one, and then certainly the other person can join in the meetings, and if there's an opening, apply another time. Ed?
I move to nominate Marie Reg to continue on in her role on the Disability Commission.
Excellent. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Paul to appoint Marie. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote for that appointment. Myself, yes. Julie?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Jonathan?
Yes.
Ed?
Aye.
And Paul?
Yes.
Excellent. Historical Commission, we have 2 to appoint. There's 1 incumbent and 3 have submitted applications. The chair recommends that Jen Osterhout and Therese Fraser be reappointed, and that they would, best scenario, Nancy would welcome Frank Gian Gregorio and Mark DeBella as associate members of the commission. In that role, they would be non-voting members, I assume. So, but Sherry, do we not have? Oh, Therese Fraser's application was received after the deadline.
Exactly.
Do we know how far after the deadline?
I know, huh? I don't know the exact date. Yeah.
I think in times of COVID and online, it seems to be a little different, but I'll certainly, the chair of the commission would like Therese and Jennifer to be appointed, and then Frank Gian Gregorio and Mark DeBella as associate members. Any motion in second?
Madam Chair, I move to appoint Jen Osterhout and Therese Fraser as voting members, and further move to appoint Frank Gian Gregorio and Mark DeBella as non-voting associate members.
Great. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right, seeing none, voting on that motion, Ed?
If we do have 3 applicants that have submitted on time and 1 that hasn't, would we not just have the two of the voting members from those that did submit on time and accept all 4 of the members? Doesn't that seem like it would be more fair to the people who did submit on time?
Yeah, I mean, you could certainly look at that way, and I think sometimes incumbent members are a little bit forgetful on re-upping. I'm sure half of us would lose our seats if we had to do that, but I totally get what you're saying, Ed.
My only concern is I know that Madam Clerk went to great effort to reach out to everyone who was up, and also reached out to the chairs of each of these committees, boards, and commissions. So it's not as if I get it, years ago that may have been an issue, but I know that Madam Clerk spends a lot of her time to do this and to reach out to folks. And so it feels a little bit like if we're going to have that kind of effort put in, what's the point?
You know what? I absolutely hear you. And the ones that we have allowed, there's been a need for a seat. So I haven't had an issue with that. Do any other members want to discuss this issue?
Madam Chair, just out of curiosity, is he asking that all 4 be made voting members?
No. Nancy Bertrand is asking that the 2 incumbents stay as voting members, and Mr. Gian Gregorio and DeBella join as associate members, non-voting.
And because Teresa Fraser submitted late, Ed is asking that one of the other 2 become voting members? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes. Which I appreciate that argument. Sherry goes to a lot.
I as well. So it's a fair, and Madam Chair, through you, Sherry, how long was the delay?
Well, I know when she dated her application, it was February 25th. I just gotta find when the deadline date was.
We can move on, Sherry. Is that something you can find in the next few minutes?
Yeah.
All right. If we could table this vote and just, if that's okay with folks, and come back to it?
Yep, Madam Chair, as the individual who made the motion, yes.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan. All right, moving on to the Permanent Building Committee. There are 3 voting, no, Steve, there were 4 voting spots open, did you
Yes,
tell me?
there'll be 4, yes.
Okay,
Because of resignation before.
right. So we've heard from the chairman, Joe Bertrand, that he recommends reappointment of Jason Cohen and Janine Fabiano. Am I reading that right? Yes.
Yep.
And he also recommends appointing Philip Renzi and Mark Moshe as voting members.
So the 4 that you just mentioned were all voting members?
Would be.
Would be.
Would be voting members.
Correct. Yep, so Philip Renzi and Mark Moshe would move from non-voting members to voting members. And they've both been, I think, very much involved
Yes, they have.
in the
Thank you.
committee.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to appoint Jason Cohen, Janine Fabiano, Philip Renzi, and Mark Moschio as voting members, and further appoint, per Mr. Bertrand's request, Nassos Phillips as a non-voting member.
Excellent. Is there a second on Jonathan's motion?
Second.
Great. And I appreciate Mr. Phillips has applied. He clearly wants to get involved in our town committee, so this is a great place to start. Any discussion? Ed?
I would just point out that the reason that Mr. Renzi is currently a non-voting member is because he didn't submit on time. So we did have a pretty solid practice in the past of recognizing that. And he's a great asset too. I mean, he's been very much involved, and I think he's a great addition.
Absolutely. Okay, so seeing no further discussion, roll call vote to appoint the listed members as voting and Mr. Nassos Phillips as a non-voting member. Myself, yes. Julie?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Jonathan?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
And Ed?
Aye.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, and I found the date.
Oh, good.
Sorry, it took me so long.
No, that's okay.
The deadline was February 12th, and Teresa Frazier's application was dated February 25th.
Okay.
Thank you,
So,
Madam Chair. In light of the information from Ms. Dalton, I'm going to withdraw my motion to name Ms. Osterhout and Ms. Frazier as the voting members of the Historical Commission.
Mm-hmm. Wait, you're still.
I'm sorry, I'll withdraw the full motion
Got
so
it.
that we can start fresh.
Perfect, thank you. Would someone like to make a motion to appoint 2 members to this commission? I believe Jennifer Osterhout seems to be one of them based on our previous conversation. Julie?
I'd like to motion based on the resumes to appoint Mark DeBella. It looks like he's done some restoration work here with the Greenwood Church. It seems like he'd be a good addition.
Great, excellent. Any further discussion? So the motion would be to appoint moving Jennifer Osterhout and Mark DeBella. Is there a second on that?
Second.
Ed, second. Any discussion?
Madam Chair, if I may, and maybe a request to Councillor Smith-Galvin, would you entertain a friendly amendment to add to the motion, adding Therese Frazier and Frank Giangregorio as non-voting members to the Historical Commission?
Yep.
Second.
Excellent. So the appointment of Jennifer Osterhout, Mark DeBella as voting members to the Historical Commission, and Frank Giangregorio and Teresa Frazier as non-voting members. Myself, yes. Julie?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Jonathan?
Yes.
Ed?
Aye.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, Sherry.
Oh, you're welcome.
Recreation Committee. We're appointing 3 and we have 3 applicants. Annie Duval and Christine Gargano are currently on the commission, and Tony Longo is applying. Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? So the motion is to appoint all 3 candidates to the Recreation Commission. Myself, yes. Julie?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Jonathan?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
And Ed?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Veteran Advisory Board. There is 1 appointment that the chair spoke to and supports placing on the board. Joseph DeLolio. Is there a motion and a second to approve Mr. DeLolio, who I believe is a Navy veteran, to the board?
So moved.
Moved by Ed,
Second.
seconded by Julie. Any discussion? Seeing none. Myself, yes. Julie?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Jonathan?
Yes.
And Ed?
Aye.
Great, thank you. Last one. Zoning Board of Appeals. We have so am I reading this wrong, Sherry? That your note says 1 voting spot and 3 alternate spots, but the recommendation from the ZBA recommends that 4 members be appointed to new 3-year terms. Am I not reading that correctly?
You are reading that correctly. Yep.
I believe, Madam Chair, that they would be the 3 alternates and the 1 voting member would make up the 4. So I think that's how you get to the 4.
And I believe they remain the same.
Okay, it's just the way it's written.
I know it is, yeah.
So we're voting for 4 voting members.
Well, they're
No.
alternates, so if members are not available, then it's an adjudicatory board, so they have to be there. So that's why we're all.
I see. Okay, okay. I'm sorry for being a little dense. It was
No.
hard to reconcile the letter from the ZBA
Yeah.
to
Agreed.
what's listed. Nope, no problem at all. So,
Madam Chair, just for clarification, we are only voting for 1 voting member and 3 alternates, correct?
correct.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So, is there a motion and a second to approve one of the members as a voting member and the remaining 3 as alternates?
Madam
Madam
Chair,
Chair.
based upon the chair of the ZBA's comments earlier, I make a motion to appoint Charles Tarbell, who is currently the voting member, back to the voting seat.
Yep.
And to appoint Mr. McIntosh, Mr. Feely, and Mr. Lucy to the alternate positions they currently hold.
Is there a second?
Second.
Excellent. Any discussion? Seeing none, the motion to appoint Chip Tarbell to the board and as 3 alternates, Gregory McIntosh, Michael Feely, and Tom Lucy. Roll call vote. Myself, yes. Maureen?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Jonathan?
Yes.
Ed?
Aye.
And Paul?
Yes.
Okay. I think we survived all the appointments. Is that correct? All right.
Until next meeting.
Until next meeting. Oh, you're always a bright ray of sunshine. Okay. Okay. If we can, I'm going to jump to matters not anticipated for the agenda, item 15, before we do 14. Does any member have a matter not anticipated for the agenda? Jonathan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to start just by thanking you and the members of the public at the beginning who spoke about the hate incident yesterday in Wakefield. I know it's something that has left a lot of us shaken, a lot of us disgusted, and I certainly know that, knowing all of my colleagues as I do, that, it's activities and behavior that none of us would condone. In light of what happened, I'm making a motion tonight for the town council to accept a proclamation that is intended to both condemn the actions yesterday, as well as reaffirm the proclamation that we made a couple of years ago after some incidents of racist and anti-Semitic graffiti in town. I'm bringing this motion tonight, and I'm bringing it up as a matter not anticipated because I do think that time is of the essence. I've talked to a number of individuals today who, quite frankly, are feeling threatened and unsafe and unwelcome in town. And I think as leaders in our community, as Mr. Lieber pointed out in his comments earlier, it is incumbent upon us to respond to that. And I think it's incumbent upon us to speak out. And so in light of that, if you'll give me the indulgence of actually reading the proclamation, I know I did circulate it individually to my fellow counselors today, but if you wouldn't mind for me to read it, I'd like to enter this as a motion for the record.
Certainly.
Great. A proclamation reaffirming Wakefield's commitment to acceptance and openness among all our citizens. Whereas the town of Wakefield's policies, procedures, and practices are intended to prohibit discrimination based on race, color, national origin, ancestry, sex, disability, age, religion, veteran status, uniformed military service, sexual orientation, genetic information, pregnancy, marital status, gender identity, or any other classification protected by law. And whereas it is the further policy of the Wakefield Public Schools to prevent the harassment and discrimination based on race, color, sex, age, gender identity, sexual orientation, religion, national origin, limited English proficiency, disability, or housing status. And whereas Wakefield has experienced multiple incidents of hate speech and vandalism in recent years, including the recent display of a White Lives Matter banner by members of an organization identified by the Anti-Defamation League and the Southern Poverty Law Center as a neo-Nazi group. And whereas these incidents have occurred against a backdrop of increasing violence against communities of color across the United States, including the recent racially motivated shootings targeted at Asian American women in the Atlanta area. And whereas the number of hate crimes reported in the United States in 2019 reached its highest level in more than a decade, and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention have identified racism as a serious public health threat that directly affects the well-being of millions of Americans. And whereas the Wakefield School Committee, Wakefield Town Council, and Wakefield Human Rights Commission unanimously approved a resolution dated December 4, 2018, condemning racism, racially motivated violence, anti-Semitism, and all forms of hate speech. Therefore, be it resolved that the town of Wakefield, through the elected members of its town council, reaffirms its 2018 proclamation declaring that hate has no home in Wakefield. The town council further condemns all incidents of hate speech and racially motivated violence, both in Wakefield and across the country, and declares its intention to adopt policies and practices that reaffirm Wakefield's place as a welcoming community that values diversity and inclusion. Be it further resolved, as duly voted by the town council, that this resolution be shared with school and municipal leaders in Wakefield and across our region to strengthen our collective fight against racism, hatred, institutional bias, anti-Semitism, and all forms of discrimination. Signed on behalf of the town council by its chair. So thank you, Madam Chair. That's my motion for this evening.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. I can certainly open up for comment, and I think there is absolutely nothing wrong with us having this proclamation underscoring what's happening, even in Wakefield. And it is a different time than 2018, and we've seen increased incidents. As I've said, my only comment would be to take out, I don't know that I would talk about the White Lives banner very specifically within the proclamation. I think we can, other paragraphs target it. I don't know that I want to make that part of a proclamation because it speaks very specifically to one incident. And maybe tweak the no problem with regard to Asian hate crimes, but I don't know that, again, I would make it specific to Atlanta or the shooting. Those are just two of my thoughts. Otherwise, I think the general language is absolutely fine.
And Madam Chair, if I may, I should have mentioned this in my motion. You know, we are sort of doing this in a very sort of rapid pace. Again, I think because of the urgency and the importance of us speaking out. So given that, and you know, given that this is something that, you know, is a little bit hot off the presses, you know, as the individual who made this motion, I'm very open to amendments to the motion and tweaks to the language as the council may wish to pursue tonight. I think that's reasonable, and certainly, you know, to the extent that we can get to a place this evening where we have a proclamation that we can agree on, and I hope, candidly, I hope that we can agree on unanimously. You know, I'm happy to entertain changes that would get us there.
Great, thank you, Jonathan. Any other comments? Oh,
I'll
Julie.
say something. It's in my hand. Thank you, Jonathan, for bringing this. I think it's really important that we as town leaders stand up and reaffirm the proclamation that we made in 2018. I agree that if there's any amendments that need to be made that keep the spirit of the proclamation, those can be made. I would, however, argue that I think pointing out examples is always a very kind of vivid, visible way to remind us of why we did this and why we're doing this now. And I kind of feel like it might be diluted. You know, when we're reading this a year or two from now, you know, this is what drove us to this action. And I think it brings back kind of visceral memories that we might not get just reading between the lines. In fact, I honestly can't even remember the actual incidents that moved us to do the December 2018 one. So I'm not against keeping the examples in there. I think they're a reminder of what we're dealing with at this moment in time and what we're trying to work towards.
Ed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I thought it was nice last time in 2018 when we had that collaboration, when we voted unanimously with the school committee, when we had the joint meeting at the Walton. And I would be interested in getting the school committee perspective as well into something like this, because I think it's important that we get it right if we're going to do something. And I would like that additional input relative to it. Is school committee meeting tomorrow night? I think they're normally night after us, I believe, right? So
that's correct. Their meeting is tomorrow night.
I don't know, like how we work logistics of that, but is it something that we can further develop and then come back to the next meeting on, specifically after we've gotten some more input, say from school committee as well, just to make sure we have it representing as broadly as we can?
I don't have a problem with us doing on this issue, doing something separate than the school committee, because in 2018, it was directly in response to kids in their graffiti, young people in their graffiti. So in some incidents that happened in the school, I believe. So I don't mind us having, you know, they could do something that's very similar to us. I don't mind us doing it alone, although I'm also not against. I mean, we just received this late afternoon, you know, early afternoon, late afternoon, but a lot of us work, so we might not have had time to dive in. You know, if people are concerned about wanting to make more suggestions or tweaks that we can do tonight. Julie.
I feel like we're the leaders of this town, and this is a very immediate issue. I mean, obviously there are going to be future incidents and we could make this perfect, but the symbolism of doing it tonight and us being leaders is that we are standing up and we are using our voice and we're using our positions. absolutely. If the school committee wants to take ours or amend it or sign on to it, that will just reinforce what we're doing. But I don't think that we need to edit this to death. I think that we need to come up with language that reflects the sentiments that I think everybody, I hope everybody on this body believe and wants to set forth, and we do it tonight.
Thanks, Julie. Jonathan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of thoughts, and I do echo Councillor Smith-Galvin's comments as well. I will be happy, if we do vote to approve something tonight, to share that with Chair Purcell and the other members of the school committee, to the extent that it's something that they want to reflect upon in their meeting as well. I have not spoken to any of them, so I don't know if it's something that either the chair or the superintendent are planning to bring up. I do want to highlight something else, just in some back and forth by email that Councillor Dombrowski and I had today. He mentioned the fact that this would be something that we also could address via the Wakefield Vision 2030 project. And I think that's absolutely right as we think about kind of a long-term statement of our values. And in fact, as we look ahead to the third public forum, we do have a topic area where we will be talking about diversity and inclusion. And really digging into the values that our community shares in that regard. I think, though, there's urgency in doing something about yesterday's incident now, though. I think the immediacy of a reaction to something as shocking and really targeting for many people in town is really critical. And so, while I don't want to lose the longer term discussions that we have, because I think those are important as well, and I don't want to lose the fact that I want those longer term discussions to lead to action too. I think there are things that we, as a community and as leaders, we need to be thinking about that go beyond just words. We've talked, for example, about institutional bias training for town employees. And, a couple of meetings ago, Councillor Butt mentioned some of the work that the police department's done. We should be talking about and making sure we're implementing similar work for other town employees and probably board members across the community as well. All of that's really important, but none of that should take away from, I think, the very urgent and real need for us to stand up and make sure that people in our community who are feeling unsafe today know that we as leaders don't accept this behavior, that we reject it, and that we're going to do everything we can to make sure that hate has no home in Wakefield.
Thanks, Jonathan. I'm happy to vote on this tonight. Perfect should never be the enemy of the good. So if I might change one of those paragraphs, but I won't vote against it if it stays in. Just want to make that clear. Ed.
I guess, my concern is I don't want to dignify such a fringe group with even the value of keystrokes in something that we're going to, potentially be signing off on. Like, I don't think that they're worthy of that. And in some ways, I kind of feel like we're giving them more oxygen by in an odd way promoting them and almost legitimizing them in a way that I don't think they're deserving of it. So I guess going back to Chair Santos's point, the idea of being specific with examples and groups, I mean, in a way, I think it gives them credibility that they're undeserving of. And so I would sooner have us make the statements that have the same sentiment, if that's what we're going to do this evening. But I mean, what any person that's like standing out there and saying you're just insightful, horrible things isn't worthy of us issuing a proclamation against calling them out specifically. I just don't think that they deserve that. They and I fully respect free speech, but this is obviously very different. So it gives me great pause to want to even identify this particular group, or I guess there was some kind of a movement over the weekend from what I'm hearing. I don't know much about it, but from what I'm hearing, some kind of national movement that seemed to have been a bust. I think thankfully so. But why are we legitimizing the actions of a few people who came into town and did something that's pretty deplorable? Like, let's not even recognize them specifically and give their organization credibility.
Jonathan, could we, on the White Lives Banner paragraph, what do you think about ending it at White Lives Banner?
I wouldn't be opposed to it. I just want to, if I may just respond to Councilor Dombrowski's comments, because certainly we don't want to distinguish or overly recognize the perspectives of a neo-Nazi group. I mean, that's not the intention. I think the concern and the reason why I want to be thoughtful of how we address it, and I think this is a really good discussion to have, is that I also don't want to bury the issue. I don't want to whitewash what actually happened, because I think that could be perceived, by people who feel victimized by this as, really delegitimizing, I think, the hurt and pain that it caused. And so I think this is a hard issue, and it's definitely something that that I struggle with too when I think about what's the right way of approaching it. But I just want to make sure that we have a thoughtful dialogue and a thoughtful and intentional discussion around how we want to address that, so that we're not, perhaps unintentionally or sort of with the best of intentions, we don't end up maybe furthering the harm that we could be causing. I think it's something that, certainly as a town, I mean, we aren't the most diverse of communities, and that does carry forward to a lot of our governing boards as well. And so, I think this is a hard thing for many of us to speak about with authority, but again, I just want to make sure that we're careful and thoughtful about how we think about that phrasing, if that makes sense to my colleagues.
No, it absolutely does. And as someone who writes and teaches writing, I'm probably being overly picky, but I'm just wondering, the recent display of a White Lives banner by members of a nationally recognized hate organization. Neo-Nazi almost makes it too narrow for me, frankly, because it's a white supremacist organization as well. So I don't know if that ends there, by members of a nationally recognized hate organization, period.
I'd be comfortable with that change, if that's an amendment you'd like to suggest, Madam Chair.
Sure, I would make an amendment that paragraph read, whereas Wakefield has experienced multiple incidents of hate speech and vandalism in recent years, including the recent display of a White Lives banner, White Lives.
Sorry, we can collect my typo there too.
Right, White Lives Matter, right, by members of a nationally recognized hate organization, period. Right, White Lives Matter banner should be changed. Paul.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm still struggling with the fact that we are denouncing what occurred, but we're still drawing attention to the individual. And I really am having a hard time with that, because I don't want to give them any fuel at all to the fire that's involved. A comment was made earlier today that we should do a counter protest. That's absolutely wrong. Just talk to the police chief. He'll even tell you that's not the right action to take on something like this. When it comes, ignoring them as to what their actions are, but condemning their actions is the proper course of action. Not highlighting them, because you're fueling their fire, because you're acknowledging them at this point. And I don't agree with acknowledging them. We didn't do it for any of the other organizations over the years that have come before it, especially like the ones that were on the steps of the library. They had the right to come in here. They came in here. It was disruptive, but we didn't make a big issue of it when we condemned them as far as calling out their name. You just want to condemn their actions, because that's what we don't agree with. We don't agree with what they are, but don't highlight them. Why would you do that? I just don't understand the reasoning to doing that. But if you can come to an agreement on the wording, I'm fine with the changes of the wording, but I'm just not wrapping my head around highlighting that anything that they did, because that's only making it, something that we're proclaiming, and we're actually putting their name into it. I'm not getting into that is right now. Maybe more discussion will help, but I don't know what to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Ed.
I think my only other observation with this is, as I understand it, this was an outside organization that came into Wakefield. This was not Wakefield residents that gathered together holding a banner. And I think the idea of, because when you read this, certainly we're renouncing these actions as a community, but I think someone looking back a couple of years from now may think, in fact, it was Wakefield residents who, in fact, were, the impetus behind this. I've heard that they were shifted from one community to another, then they ended up in Wakefield, I guess. But I think the idea of identifying them as an outside organization is an important distinction, because I don't understand this to be Wakefieldians who were participating in this, and that's an important distinction, because I do think we have a community of good people here, and I would be awfully hard pressed to find someone in town that would be standing with that group.
Ooh. Julie. Oh, I could find some people that would stand with the group,
Yeah,
but that's
I don't know where
another
to go
point.
with that, but I don't
Julie.
wanna go there. I think, wow, I think I just lost my train of thought. I guess I think that the argument of drawing attention to this awful organization, I agree, is not ideal, but I think it's far worse to stay silent. And I don't, I'm not sure I agree with the counter protest. They came here because Malden stood up to them. So they moved to Wakefield. And if we don't stand up, and if we don't say something, or if we stay silent on who they are or why they're here, then they will keep coming. And so, however we want to word it, I think it's important to call it out. Not with pictures,
I agree with that, Julie. Don't get me wrong. I agree with that. Okay, I'm not saying that we shouldn't call it out. I'm not saying that we shouldn't make a comment about it. I just say we shouldn't highlight the individual group, because that only gives them more strength and more power.
Well, and we don't actually name the group here.
Right.
We name the action.
Yep.
And I think with the edits that we just discussed, we recognize them as a national, not a local Wakefield organization. Right. So I think that probably meets everybody's needs as I'm hearing it.
Okay.
Thanks.
I would just ask that we say outside group, because I don't believe that this was a Wakefield coordinated event. It seems very clear that they had migrated from Malden to here. I don't think it was Wakefield based or Wakefield organized, is my understanding, unless someone has different knowledge than I.
No, I think that's a fine assumption, but I think we're calling it members of a nationally recognized hate group or national organization. I think the national makes it clear it's not local, but we had comments on social media that didn't think anything was wrong with it. So I'm not saying those people took part in it, but I do think there's people in our community that I guarantee they got beeps from people in our community. So I don't know that I would highlight that it was. I think we've already highlighted it's not a Wakefield group by putting a national organization was behind it. Jonathan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with that. And, the other concern that I would have about, explicitly labeling it as an outside group is that, we don't actually know that, where each individual sort of participant in that sign holding came from. And so I don't think we can legitimately say that, they were non-Wakefield residents. But more importantly, in B, I think that, and I know that this is not the intention, but I worry that almost creates sort of a perception that, somehow it would be less wrong if they were our friends and neighbors in Wakefield. And I don't think that's right. I don't think that's our intention. And I think that all of us would be horrified if one of our friends or neighbors that was from Wakefield participated or did such a thing. And so I'm comfortable with the language, Madam Chair, that you suggested, and appreciate the writer's eye that you have in making that. I would be concerned about trying to draw a distinction of the individuals that participate in this and as outsiders, because I think it unintentionally weakens, the condemnation that we're aiming to address tonight.
Great. Maureen.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm just, thank you, Jonathan, for drafting that. I'm just going to add just my viewpoint as a person of color. So Whether it was a national group or people from here, I don't think we know. But out of 351 cities and towns, they came to Wakefield. They left Malden. From what we've gathered, they came to Wakefield. They hold a sign that said White Lives Matter, which directly impacts people of color, directly impacts Black people, brown people, people of color, that my life is not as valuable as that life. They were in town for hours. People went by, people honked, people waved. I did not get a text about it. I get text about fires. I get text about lighting being out. This was not, people were not calling the cops and saying, hey, these people in our town. So there is something wrong when that happens. So hate was brought to our town. It was not brought, like we really have to look about how we dealt with it and why it happened here. And as Julie mentioned, in Malden, there were counter protests. I don't know if that's the answer, but I don't know how they were in town for hours and none of us heard about it till later that day, until we saw it on social media. And if you weren't on social media, I don't know, I don't get the item. I don't know if the item covered it, but a townwide email did not go out. You know, this resolution is us taking a stand as a town that this was unacceptable. I'm really looking forward to this being the start of a conversation. Last June, we talked about implicit bias training for town employees and boards. I want to have, pandemic wreak havoc. It's time to have that conversation again. Last meeting, I talked about, Asian hate crimes. Walked by two businesses in town that have a Stop Asian Hate. I would love to know conversations that we've had with Asian business owners. This is not something new, but 10 people, and I know it happened, what was it, 2002 it happened? But what happened was really shocking. And as a person of color on this elected board, there's not a lot of us that are appointed or elected in this town. And I just need everyone to think about, when you saw pictures, those pictures of those people holding that sign have traveled throughout the entire country. I've heard from people that grew up in Wakefield that live in California and Texas and DC being like, who were these people and why were they in our town? And again, they weren't in Linfield, they weren't in Reading, they weren't in Stoneham. They chose Wakefield, multiple locations in Wakefield. So I appreciate the resolution. I think it's really important, and I am asking for it to be the first step and us kind of coming up with what the next steps are, because it is 24 hours of our fellow citizens and residents being shocked and disgusted. And I don't care who they were, but for hours they walked around our town and they got horns and thumbs up. And that's just, we need to do better. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Maureen. Would anyone like to make a motion?
Madam Chair, I did make a motion already, though I'm not sure if we ever seconded it. And nor do I think that we officially moved to amend my motion based on.
Right. So can someone make a motion based on the amended language suggested in a second for us to issue this proclamation?
Madam Chair, if I could maybe make one other sort of proofreading edit as we're looking at this, and I appreciate Mr. Mayo bringing this to my attention earlier. In the second paragraph, can I suggest that we change it to, from whereas it is the further policy, if we can make that whereas it is also the policy of the Wakefield Public Schools.
Of course.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Again, this was a little bit of an on the fly effort. But with that change, and Madam Chair, with the language that you suggested for the third paragraph, I would like to make a motion that the Town Council accept the proclamation as amended this evening.
Thank you.
Second.
Seconded by Paul. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, all in favor. Myself, yes. Julie?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Ed? Ed?
Oh, sorry, aye.
That's okay. And Jonathan?
Yes.
Excellent. Unanimously passed. Thank you all. I know this is a hard discussion, and I think Maureen's right. It's just the first. first step.
And
with
thank you to
some
my
true
colleagues
action.
for indulging me for this. I know it's the end of a long meeting, but I appreciate the conversation, and I hope it's one that we continue in the future, because it is incredibly important, and I think it's an area that we always need to strive to do better as leaders in town. So thank you, everyone, for again indulging me at this hour.
Thank you for drafting it. Any matters not anticipated for the agenda? Further matters? Seeing none, any announcements? Jonathan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm going to try to be quick. I had a number of things, but again, I know it's late. I just want to start to my friend Councillor Janako for your comments earlier. You know, I was hoping and expecting we would have some time at the next meeting to lavish you with praise and tribute, and hopefully we still will. But you know, to the extent that we can, I just want to briefly say just thank you to you for all of your service. And you know, for me as still the newest member of the council, you know, you've been generous with your time and opinions with me over the last couple of years. You know, anytime that I've asked you for advice or asked you for your thoughts on something, you've been incredibly responsive. And, you know, even though, you know, sometimes we don't always agree on things, I just want you to know how much I've valued having you as a colleague and hopefully as a friend going forward as you continue on to the next phase. So again, hopefully we can continue lavishing you with praise in 2 weeks, but in case you decide to skip out under the cover of darkness before then, I didn't want that to go unsaid.
Thank you.
On to a couple of less exciting things, but still important. The first was just a request to the chair and Mr. Mayo, given that our next meeting is the last one before town meeting. I was hoping that we can spend some time on the agenda reviewing kind of the sum total of all the budgets approved and how that relates to our fiscal forecast for 2021. I know, you know, given that we kind of approve these things piecemeal, I find it helpful just to see kind of how the picture comes together before we bring it to town meeting. Two very quick updates from the planning board. One is that they've been doing a fair amount of work over the last couple of meetings and will be bringing us back on their agenda for their meeting tomorrow to look at possible ways in which they could create a lake district, either through a zoning change or a zoning overlay. You know, this is still very much a brainstorming discussion. There's nothing set in stone, but you know, they're looking at ways in which they can preserve both, you know, the ecological foundation of the lake, the natural beauty of the surroundings, and also assure access to residents. It's been a really, I think, positive and thought-provoking discussion, and I really commend the planning board and the chair, Bill Spalding, for bringing it up. Again, it is on the agenda tomorrow for their meeting, which is at 7 o'clock, and for any residents who are interested in either hearing the discussion or contributing to it, I'd encourage you to participate in that meeting. Also, the planning board will have a vacancy. Board member Bill DeMori, who has served on the board for a number of years, and in particular was a really important part of the board over the last year or so as they've been short staffed, you know, has resigned. So there will be an open position on the board that we'll be working with the planning board to appoint. Finally, just in keeping on the topic of planning and visioning, the second virtual public forum for Vision 2030 has been scheduled. That's going to be held on April 28th. So it's the day after the town election at 7 o'clock. And for folks that want to participate in that, please go to the town website. There's a link to Vision 2030 there, and you can pre-register for that. Similar to the first public forum, we're going to be covering 4 topics in detail. The 4 topics for this forum are going to be our cultural and historical landscape, public facilities and infrastructure, enhancing business districts and opportunities, and adapting to environmental challenges. And that last topic, we've obviously done a lot of work over the last few years with the Envision Wakefield Resilient project that the Environmental Sustainability Committee has been involved in. We'll certainly leverage that work as we collect feedback going forward. But again, hope as many people as possible can participate in that and contribute to a great discussion. So with that, thank you, Madam Chair. Again, appreciate the time.
Thanks, Jonathan. Maureen, then Julie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to echo what Jonathan said. Paul, I hope to see you in 2 weeks so we can really thank you for all that you do as one of the elders on this committee right now. Thank you always for answering questions. A knowledgeable elder. But hopefully we will be able to talk more about that in 2 weeks and praise you in the appropriate manner. Just a couple of updates. Just to wish everyone out there, Ramadan starts today. Starts tomorrow is the first day of fasting. So everyone out there who will be fasting, happy Ramadan. Just if you know any Muslims in your life, be kind. They are not eating or drinking and not swearing or smoking all day. So be kind and patient for the next 30 days. Just to echo what Maria Muty said at the start of the meeting, the Human Rights Commission is meeting next Tuesday at 7 p.m. If you were shocked and dismayed about what happened this weekend, please go to an HRC meeting and let's talk about those steps that we're going to take. And just the last thing, which Steve might be talking about, but Senator Markey came to our town last week and went to visit some businesses who had PPP funding. And I looked it up, and in July, 126 businesses in Wakefield had gotten PPP money, including a business called Wakefield Donut. I don't know what that is, but I want to find out about it. And then what Senator Lewis told us is that Governor Baker had given out grants too to 79 small businesses, totaling $4 million. So Wakefield's gotten a lot of money. And Steve, I'm hoping that our new Economic and Community Development Director, Erin Kokinda, could actually come to a future meeting and kind of tell us about how businesses are doing in this recovery. Because I think there's, including Artichokes and Sabatinos that we visited last week, there's probably some great success stories. And I'd love to just hear about those and hear about these businesses, including Wakefield Donut, hear all about them. So if we could get that on a future agenda. Thank you.
Thanks, Maureen. Julie, then Paul.
Thank you. And Paul, you certainly shocked us all by your announcement tonight, but I too hope you'll be back in 2 weeks. And if not, I am sure we will see each other around town. I have definitely appreciated working with you. Your insight is always well-informed. You have great knowledge, and I hope you're not going too far so that we can all call upon it going forward. Other than that, I think my only announcement right now is that it is Earth Month. And while none of the town committees are organizing any in-person activities for obvious reasons, the ESC, the Environmental Sustainability Committee, has launched a Facebook page. Thanks very much to Jen McDonald and Tom Mullen and others who helped us work through some of the guidelines and parameters around that. But it's on Facebook at Wakefield ESC, all one word, Wakefield ESC. And we'll be posting things there throughout the month, including a little bit of, opt outside, Wakefield open space type work. And you can always use hashtag Earth Day Wakefield. I haven't talked with Anne about this, but I am hoping there might be some time at the meeting on April 26th, which is right after Earth Day, to maybe do a quick summation of the electric vehicles and solar. The light department's done some really good analysis on it, and maybe that's an appropriate time to share it. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. Paul.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just going to make a couple of announcements or congratulatories, please. Jonathan touched on Bill DeMori, who is retiring after a long career on the planning board. Best of luck to him in the future. If I read correctly, we also have to make comment about Ruth Clay. I hear that our health director is retiring as well. Good luck to her on her future endeavors. And we are losing one of our best DPW workers, Joe Goodrow. He's retiring. I wish him the best. He's an outstanding gentleman, always willing to help you out in every case. One person I'm really gonna miss is Joe. I mean, he's a fixture in the DPW department, but those are the additional comments I would like to make at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Ed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councilor Janako, I feel like it's a cliffhanger. It's like, who shot the alarm for those of us old enough to remember that. I don't know if we're going to see you next time. So in the event we don't, thank you for your service to the town. I know that your heart's been in it for a long time, and Wakefield is a better place because of it. So thank you for that. Just wanted to remind everyone too that we had a really great group, including some folks that are on this Zoom, take part in the White Ribbon campaign video project. It is available on WCAT's YouTube channel, as well as waveonline.org, so WAAVonline.org. And I again want to send my sincere thanks to the entire WCAT team, but especially Ryan Boyd, who just was fantastic in helping to put that together. It was a really fun project and really meaningful, and I encourage everyone to please check it out if you haven't already. But it was great to see our community come together in such in an important way. So with that, thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Paul, I'm going to do the Irish goodbye. You know, we kind of sneak out the side because we don't want to, and I'm Irish for those people who think I'm disparaging my people. Don't want to be too emotional, but you've been a good friend and a colleague, and you listen, you sometimes compromise, you really care about what your colleagues have to say. You make delicious limoncello and cookies. I will miss those terribly. But you're still around, so I'm sure we can get those. But anyways, I hope to see you April 26th so that we don't have to do this tonight. I have two announcements. One is that our arborist extraordinaire, Dennis Fazio, who is the supervisor of the Cemetery, Forestry, and Parks Division of the Wakefield Public Works, was named the 2021 Tree Warden of the Year by Massachusetts Tree Wardens and Foresters Association. So we are going to have a little celebration. They're going to plant a tree on Dennis's behalf for being so fabulous. So congrats to Dennis and his crew. The last thing I want to say is we received a letter. Well, Chief Scory received a letter from a local psychologist in town. This was just last week. And the psychologist noted that he had one of the worst days of his career because he had to Section 12 an adult patient who was aggressive and paranoid. Section 12 is an involuntary commitment. And this psychologist was very emotional about doing it because it's a big deal, and this person's delusions had worsened quite a bit. He called the Wakefield Police Department and immediately was impressed by the dispatcher, who was professional, courteous, and calm, even when the doctor indicates he was not. Almost within minutes, officers Halliday and Warren showed up, and the client exited the vehicle and I think started approaching the officers. Our officers approached the client warmly, with open body language, with warm greetings, saying we just want to talk, in a very empathetic way. The client still ran. Client was subdued by the officers in as gently and humanely a way as possible, according to the psychologist. The psychologist goes on to say that his client immediately calmed down. Officers gave him positive affirmations. They told him why they had to chase him. And he became very gentle. The client had an extreme fear of police officers, so this psychologist thought it was quite miraculous. Then Jennifer Wiskowski showed up and helped not only calm the client down, but also the mother of the client, who was obviously quite upset. Jennifer de-escalated the mother, talked about community resources, and the mother was unbelievably appreciative of what Jennifer did for not only her son, but also herself. I just want to read what the psychologist said. As you know, many departments don't have a mental health counselor who responds to calls. She was competent, warm, and incredibly helpful. helpful. Officers Halliday and Warren stood with my client calmly and provided him with more affirmations that everything would be okay. I work with police officer candidates, and I often say to them, how will you behave on the worst day of your life? Well, I can honestly say that I hope on the worst day of my life, officers like Halliday and Warren are there to help me. Thank you to all of your department and everyone who made today an incredible success. My client will get the help he needs. He's alive and well thanks to the bravery and empathy of your staff. I have spent most of my career trying to help the men and women in blue, and today it was all paid back tenfold. That's an amazing letter that our police department received, and that I don't think that that's a letter that would go to a lot of police departments because of the efforts we've made to hire mental health professionals and the training that our officers have to deal with folks in crisis. So huge kudos to Chief Scory, to Officers Halliday and Warren, the dispatcher, the TOC, the other officers that responded, and Jennifer Wiskowski. So I thought I wanted to share that because it was a remarkable letter. Steve.
Paul will be here on the 26th, so I'm going to save my comments for then.
Good. All right. Anyone else? Are we all set? So our next meeting is Monday, April 26th, because April 27th is the election. Can I please have a motion and a second to adjourn?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Second.
Moved by Jonathan, seconded by Paul. Roll call vote. Myself, yes. Ed?
Aye.
Julie?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Jonathan?
Yes.
And Maureen?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you all and have a great week.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.